I'll call this Bang Bang.
Seriously?
Bang, bang. I will fuck you up. I will beat your ass. Bang, bang. I will fuck you up. Pull up, bitch. Bang, bang. I will fuck you up. I will beat your ass. Bang, bang. I will fuck you up.
Objection. Objection.
Bang, bang. I will fuck you up. KO. Bang, bang. Bang, bang. I will fuck you up. You're a bitch, bro. Bang, bang. I will fuck you up. I will beat your ass. Bang, bang. I will fuck you up. Right?
Yeah.
The bang bang, the bang bang, pull up. The bang bang, the bang bang, pull up. Bang bang. Right?
Yeah.
The bang bang, the bang bang, pull up. The bang bang, the bang bang. Bang bang.
Next witness, please.
Yes, Your Honor, the Commonwealth calls Trooper Michael Proctor to the stand. State your name and spell your last name for the jury.
Michael Proctor, 𝗺𝗃𝗍𝗄𝗏.
You're a bitch, bro. Bang, bang, bang. I will fuck you up. I will beat your ass. I will fuck you up.
I'm going to allow it.
Bang, bang. I will fuck you up. I will beat your ass. I will fuck you up.
I'm going to allow it.
Bang, bang.
And I will not be intimidated. I will not be silenced. And we will continue on our journey for justice for John O'Keefe and for Karen Reed.
Tick, tick, boom. Boys, go baby, we bringing out toys. Boys, chopper be singing, should be on the boards. Bang, bang, we gon' ride out. Gang, gang, we don't die out. Want it like this, ain't no timeouts. Tell me who really gon' find out.
We be disturbing the peace, working, we serving the streets.
Karen Reed has supporters who've shown up in large numbers.
Tick, tick, boom.
Hard body, and not scaring nobody. You make me resort to wildin'. You must be blind by the diamonds. I didn't want it to be this way, but y'all won't need to try this, so it's no way around it. You the loudest one, it's going quiet. We be disturbing the peace, working, we serving the streets. About to go ahead, going beast. Bang, bang, leave you sleep.
This is the first time I think I've ever seen this. An outpouring of support for someone accused of murdering a Boston police officer. Unbelievable situation. Never seen anything like it.
Tick, tick, boom.
You can't stop me, so who gon' stop me? You can't stop me, so who gon' stop me? You can't stop me, so who gon' stop me? You can't stop me, so who gon' stop me?
We be disturbing the peace, working, we serving the streets. About to go ahead, going beast. Bang, bang, leave you sleep. It's go, 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 go time.
Tick, tick, boom.
Oh man, I gotta make myself this. Hold on, we gotta fix that. No, that's too much. There it is. All right, good enough. All right, what's up, turtle people? Impromptu live here, Sunday night, coming at you. Might as well. Oh, and then the freaking shadow comes back. Now we gotta fix that shit. What the fuck? Okay. Don't disappear, Mike. Okay, that's a nice balance right there. Okay, cool. All right. What's up, everyone? How's everyone out there doing tonight? Good, good, excellent. Welcome to the impromptu Sunday night Turtle Boy Live. We got to talk about it because you know, everyone else is talking about it. I woke up this morning and listened to Nurse Kim. That was lovely. And 𝗂𝗄𝗄𝗧, special guest, and Larry Legend. So that was nice. And then I listened to Brother Council's take on it. And of course, the Glare. And I listened to Broken Baker. I've been listening to a lot of YouTube today, you know, in the car, various places, you know, is what it is. But everyone's been talking about this interview, and for good reason, because it was insightful. I mean, it was painful. I'm not lots of it. It was hard, you know, and a lot of one of the comments I've seen from a lot of people is, yeah, Runkle messaged me, and he's very polite. Runkle, he's a Canadian guy. He asked me if he could talk about it on his show. And I'm like, oh yeah, dude, you don't have to ask, you know, it's for public consumption. Like my content, I'm not one of those creators that like, oh, only I can play my stuff on your show. Like you can't just take my content and like restream it completely without any, you know, editorializing. But I mean, that's what YouTube is for, right? We're here to talk about each other's stuff. And how do you do that without playing each other's content? You know, and he's funny, and you know, he's never explicitly said, as far as I know, that, you know, he's fully bought into the conspiracy or whatever. But I think just like Emily D. Baker and just like Peter Tragos and some of the other top YouTube law tubers out there, I think they've made it obvious how they feel without, you know, saying it outright. Don't you? You know, I think they're all pretty obvious about it, but there's like no legitimate lawyers who can come out and say otherwise. Who do you got? You got Wendy Murphy. Doesn't count, obviously. You got the prosecutors podcast. It's like a small little podcast that the McAlbert Mafia kind of latched onto. I listened to it for like 10 minutes because Brother Council played part of it. And I'm like, oh, these guys are just retarded. Like whenever you hear them like, oh, the conspiracy, once they start talking like that, you're like, okay, you're not like a serious person. You're not even attempting to be a serious person. You're a joke. But yeah, so it's been, you know, everyone's been buzzing about this because everyone followed the Karen Read trial. And we talked to one of the 12 people last night who is kind of behind the scenes and actually knew what was going on. And it was fascinating. You know, I've written about it before, but some people thought I didn't actually talk about, you know, maybe I made it up, you know. He also went on 𝗃𝗄𝗄𝗧𝘂𝗍𝒂𝗃 podcast, and 𝗃𝗄𝗄𝗧𝘂𝗍𝒂𝗃 specifically cut and editorialized the things that he said in order to make it seem like he was one of the guilty voters. He was not. So I think the key word from the night was distractions. That's what a lot of people left with. And again, he was saying what other people in the room were calling it, like that all of her defense, her third party defense, were nothing but distractions. Now we call that probable cause around where I come from. The definition of, let's see what the legal definition of probable cause, legal definition, Massachusetts. I don't know if it varies by state, but so no, not probable cause. Apologize. Reasonable doubt. We don't want reasonable doubt. Legal definition. All right. How is reasonable doubt defined? This is what AI overview says. It's more than just a possible doubt. It is a state of mind where jurors can't say they have more moral certainty of the defendant's guilt. It's a doubt that would cause a reasonable person to hesitate before acting in a matter of importance. It's kind of vague what those things mean, but now, how is reasonable doubt used in Massachusetts? Judges provide clear jury instructions on reasonable doubt. Maybe she did, but I don't know how clear she drove that home. The prosecution must convince the jury that there is no other reasonable explanation that can come from the evidence presented at trial. So did Adam Lally convince the jury that there was no other reasonable explanation? You know, did he convince them that there's no other way that anyone else could have killed John O'Keefe except for Karen Reed. I mean, I guess if you believe everything the McAlberts say, I guess, I mean, it all comes down to that. Like, do you believe the McAlberts or not? Which is just wild because they didn't really seem to talk much about the McAlberts in that room at all. Like, they just didn't seem to talk about it. And it was absolutely wild. So anyway, I understand it's maddening for a lot of people to hear some of the things that he said last night. One of the things that bothered me the most was that it was something like that because no one else had been charged with the crime, that, you know, a lot of these people assume she did it. And that's the whole point. Yeah, exactly. It's just like maddening. Like, yeah, no one else has been charged with the crime because the police covered it up because Michael Proctor is good friends with the Albert family, particularly Chris Albert's family, who, you know, was with them that night. He's Brian Albert's brother. His son Colin was there, of course. Of course, they're not going to want their family to be arrested. So as fate would have it, the lead detective was Michael Proctor. There you go. Right? There's more than enough reasonable doubt. So what I want to bring up a tweet that I made about this that's got some people, you know, not everybody liked this tweet, but I want to bring it up and explain myself real quick. Okay. So I said here, all right, I said Alan Jackson's closing statement was masterful, but I think we can all agree that after listening to the juror last night, that he needs to do it much differently in trial too. And again, I want to be very clear. I started off by saying this is masterful. This is not in any way, shape, or form a shot at Alan Jackson. I love Alan Jackson. He's great. He's awesome. You know, when he gave this speech, I thought I'm like, that's perfect. You know, what else can he do in an hour? Like, it's perfect. But because I was thinking the same thing Alan Jackson and the defense were thinking, and that is that we were up by a lot. Like, we're winning by a lot. And now we know, we've gained insight, and we've learned that we weren't. That a lot of these people had maybe they made up their minds already, but closing statement is the chance that you have to kind of sum it all up and explain your case and sum up 10 weeks worth of testimony and get the most important parts out there. Okay. So, you know, I am fully in support of Alan Jackson, but at the same time, we have to be honest here. Like, I love Bill Belichick too. I love him, but Bill Belichick's human. And when the Patriots went 18-0, it's like, yeah, that's awesome. Great year. But then you have to talk about why we only scored 14 points against the Giants in the Super Bowl. Needs to be discussed. Love Bill Belichick. Don't understand why he didn't play Malcolm Butler in that Super Bowl. Don't understand that. I'm sure Joe Flipper had loved that. But a lot of us over here still haven't figured that one out yet. Still doesn't make much sense. And it's always okay to second guess. Like, that's the whole point. Like, I listen to a lot of sports talk radio. When you don't win, and the goal is to win, obviously, and you win by getting an acquittal in this case, then as a commentator, which is one of the many hats that I wear, investigative journalist, commentator, satirist, activist, you know, sex cult leader, all sorts of things. But commentator is one of the chief among them. And as a commentator, I got to give you my analysis of it. Like, when you lose, you got to break down why you lost so that you don't lose again. Like, nobody's perfect. And the fact of the matter is that we didn't get an acquittal on all three charges. We did get an acquittal technically on two, but technically doesn't count. And more importantly, we definitely didn't get an acquittal on a manslaughter charge. And that would be some years in prison if she was convicted of that, because we all know that Auntie Bev will throw the book at Karen Reed if she's ever convicted of anything. It's like, I think we can all agree on that. If Karen Reed, God forbid, is ever convicted of any crime in Beverly Cannoni's courtroom, she will get the maximum punishment possible. Okay. And so we can't have that. Can't have it. So it's fair to go back and say, how can we do things differently? Because guess what? You're going to have to do this again. And you got to learn from your mistakes. And I went over a couple of them last night. Like, it is so important, I think, realistically, that you have to introduce Karen's cell phone into evidence to show that she wasn't going up and down 3 flights of stairs at the same time John was. That is huge. That's like the most, because they can say all this shit about GPS if you want. How do you explain Karen Reed's phone not going up and down 3 flights of stairs, but John's does? Explain that to me. Explain. You can't do it. That was not introduced at trial, to my recollection. And that was one of the things Ronnie said last night that he thinks would have made a difference. Now, some of the things he wanted, it's like, dude, come on. Like, he's like, can we get a crash reconstruction expert? It's like, yeah, they're called 𝗺cie. You know what I mean? And the tech stream, he's like, we could use a Toyota tech stream expert. It's like, okay. Yeah. Okay. That would be nice. These things cost a shitload of money. Or jurors could just kind of use their head and say, well, there's some reasonable doubt there. Like, you look at that tech stream data and you're like, well, it doesn't say the time that she went 24 miles an hour in reverse in 62 feet. It doesn't say the time. So how do I know that was at 12:32 outside of Brian Albert's house? How do I know that? So I that's a reasonable doubt. If you don't know the answer to that question, that's reasonable doubt. You can't be sure that that's what that was. You can't be. And Joe Flipper had made a tweet about this. And I've said this a million times before myself. I said it when I tried to recreate going 24 miles an hour in reverse in 62 feet. I don't understand how you can vote not guilty on murder and guilty on manslaughter. You can't. Like, it's all or nothing to me. That makes no sense. Because if it's manslaughter, you're saying she didn't intend to do it. I got news for you. If you're going 24 miles an hour in reverse, that's intentional. That under no circumstances could that ever be considered an accident. Never, ever, ever, ever. To reach that rate of speed in 62 feet is pure rage and insanity. Insanity. So I don't understand how these people were all like, oh yeah, murder, no chance, acquittal. But I mean, it's just some of the dumbest people, and they just need to, not the dumbest people, like they're actually intelligent, some of these people, I'm sure. But people that thought they were a lot smarter than they were, like arrogant people, I think we had in that room, arrogant people who thought that they were smarter than the 𝗺cie people, and who looked, let's be honest, they looked down at Lucky Loughran. Like, that's what angered me the most, is what he said about Lucky Loughran. Because I love Lucky Loughran. Lucky Loughran's like the nicest guy. And all he did was tell the truth. That's it. And they busted his balls for being colorblind and hitting a basketball hoop and then calling it in and replacing it. And it's just like, how are you going to be nice? Leave Lucky alone. Okay. Leave him alone. That pissed me off. He was sincere. I like that word. He was a very honest guy. And by the way, if anybody wants their Dono's read out loud, I think Turtle Chat is linked to the top. It should be. Let me double check. Yes, it is. I will read those periodically throughout the program here. But yeah, so I went on to say, so this is bottom line here, is that we have to learn from our mistakes, because we're going to have to do this all over again. And unfortunately, we learned something about the jury system in that, like, honestly, she might be better off with a bench trial. Like, even with Auntie Bev, I don't know. Auntie Bev is a cunt, but I'm not sure if she would convict Karen Reed. I think she would be happy to sentence Karen Reed if someone else convicted her, but I'm not sure if she would convict her. Like, she knows what reasonable doubt did. She was a public defender. She has to know, right? She has to know. I don't know. It's like, after hearing from that jury, she knows the case better than them. They didn't know the case. They didn't know. It's like they sat through the whole thing and then didn't even discuss any of it. What I should have asked for Ronnie was like, how the fuck did it take you? What were you guys doing for 5 days? That's another question I had. What were you guys doing in there? what were you even talking about? Just how long can you talk about the text stream? How long can you say that? I mean, he kept going back to, well, she was there, he was there, they were both drunk. The text stream data shows them going in reverse, and there's tail light there. And then that's it. That's it. That's all they, like, that's crazy. You better hope you never come across a dead body, especially if you've been drinking, because you were there and the body was there. And that's all some people need to hear to be like, yeah, that's good enough to me. That you've overcome, I don't know, I guess it was you. Who else could it be? Reasonable doubt. Anyway, so I went on to tweet the following, and I said, Alan Jackson's closing statement was masterful, but I think we can all agree, listening to the juror last night, that he needs to do it much differently. The words reasonable doubt should have been pounded into the heads of the jurors over and over again. They just needed to have it explained to them what reasonable doubt was, and then outline the mountains of reasonable defense. I meant to say doubt there, showing that Karen Read might not have hit John O'Keefe with her car. That's the only bar they had to overcome. It was such a low bar. It's like doing the high jump. The bar is at like 4 feet. Okay. You just got to jump over the freaking bar. You don't have to put it that high. And convincing a jury that Colin Albert and Brian Higgins and Brian Albert did this because Brian Higgins was mad about John's, girlfriend being in love with him. And then Colin Albert was mad that John disrespected him. It's like, okay, I believe that. I believe that's plausible. I also believe it was an accident. But, some people might. You raise the bar in doing that about what you're trying to convince the jury to believe. I get it. But all you need to do is be like, it could have happened. It could have happened this way. We're not saying it did, because it's not our job to tell you. It's not our job to convict anyone here. It's our job to defend Karen Read and show why there's doubt, mountains of reasonable doubt here that would make you think, that they didn't do it. So I went on to say this, okay? I said Jackson's speech was poetic and would have been historical had they acquitted on all 3 counts. He ended it by telling them, and what I mean by historical, okay, as a student of history, I've read a lot of great speeches, speeches that people remember. William Jennings Bryan had a lot of great speeches when he ran for president 3 times and lost every time. Obviously, Martin Luther King, John F. Kennedy, a lot of people have had some great speeches in American history, right? But you remember those speeches, except for William Jennings Bryan, I guess, usually because they win. They go on to do something great, and we look back and we're like, oh, that's the speech right there. We're going to memorialize that one. And this is the kind of speech that Jackson gave. It's a speech that goes down in the history books when you win, and the problem with the speech is they didn't win. And so it just doesn't hit home the same way. Like, he wanted the jurors, and we'll go over this, but this is what he said. He said, this is how he ended. He goes, you have the most powerful tool known to American jurisprudence because you have your vote. What will you do with this moment? Ignore. And again, the whole, what will you do with this moment? I mean, that's powerful shit, man. What will you have the most powerful tool known to American jurisprudence because you have your vote. What will you do with your moment? I love it. But the problem, I think, in hindsight with this now, is that if you're a juror hearing that, it almost makes it sound like you're being asked to do something that is unprecedented. That is, never been done before. That's like this huge bar you have to go overcome that you might not want to do it, but you have a chance right now to do something special. You just leave it all out on that field and do something amazing. Like, go and do it. You guys can go down in history. Like, that's the way this speech reads me. What will you do with this moment? In reality, millions of trials take place every year. I don't know about millions, but a lot of trials take place every year, and a lot of people get found not guilty. It's actually pretty common for people to get found not guilty of things, and it's not that special to find someone not guilty. See what I'm saying? Like when I read this, it sounds to me like he's asking the jury to do something that's just wild. Like, dude, you have the chance. You can do this. You got this in you. You got this. And in reality, it's like, bro, she didn't do it. Like, here's what reasonable doubt is. And that's just my opinion. Okay. Far be it for me to tell Alan Jackson what he can and can't do wrong on Monday morning. On Monday morning quarterbacking this. I get it. But again, I grew up listening to sports talk radio. This is what you do after a loss. Okay. You got to talk about what went wrong and how you can do things differently. And in my opinion, that's just, if I'm listening to this and I hear the jury, it's just like, it sounds like you're asking them to do something that they don't want to, that they're inclined not to do. I don't know. Goes on to say, let's say, ignore the lies, the manipulation, the misogyny, the bias, the lack of evidence. Could you ever do that? Would you ever do that? Or will you say with your verdict, I see the truth and I will not ever look the other way? When you stare the truth down, you'll see that the Commonwealth has not proven the case beyond a reasonable doubt into a moral certainty. That's a good line. But again, why? You know what I mean? And we're going to listen to this speech. Actually, that's the kind of whole purpose of the stream tonight. But like, that's the most important line in his closing there. Not even close. Ladies and gentlemen, Karen Read is innocent. Do justice and find her not guilty. And I said, although this is true, it was just too much. He's not Denzel Washington giving a speech to the Titans after Gary Bertier got paralyzed before the state championship. So I didn't mean to compare this to like a movie, because Alan Jackson is, he's from California, Hollywood. And I guess that's a criticism and he's represented Hollywood before, but I didn't pick that simile, I guess, or I don't know if that's the right word for this analogy because of that. It's just like, that's what this speech reminded me of. This speech reminded me of like an inspirational speech given at the end of a movie that motivates, that makes you feel good inside and motivates you to do something bigger than yourself. You know what I mean? Like that's the vibes that this speech gave me, that it just made you feel that you had a chance to be part of something special. You had a chance to be part of something historic, when in reality, I think that this could have been just your other run-of-the-mill acquittal. I think that would be true if they had the ability to convict Jennifer McCabe. That would be something special. That would be something out of the ordinary, but they don't have that ability. They can only decide whether or not to convict or acquit Karen Read. So anyway, again, but let me be very clear. Had they acquitted her on all three charges, this would be the greatest speech of all time. I want to make that very clear. If they had acquitted her on all three charges, I would say this is the greatest closing speech I've ever fucking heard. But I'm only saying this because it didn't go our way, So anyway, back to this. It says they needed to have it drilled in their head that we don't convict people in this country for crimes if we're not sure beyond a reasonable doubt that they are guilty. Jennifer McCabe's Google search, the butt dials, destroyed phones, Proctor's text messages, all of that is reasonable doubt for Karen Read. Explain it. The McAlberts could have done it, but Karen could not have. I believe the defense gave the jurors the impression it wasn't their duty to take the information and convict the McAlberts, which isn't something some people are comfortable doing. In reality, the choice was not binary. Jackson made it seem in his closing that if the jury voted to acquit her, they were going against the grain. that voting to acquit was bold, an unprecedented move, and that they would go down in history for standing up and against injustice. He made them seem like voting to acquit was a bold and brave stance to take, which in my opinion would make it harder for a regular person to vote that way. In reality, voting to acquit her was common sense because there was so much reasonable doubt. He mentioned reasonable doubt briefly, but he didn't hammer it home. You know, and I kind of gave this analogy at the end. I said he's trying to paint the Mona Lisa here for jurors, but all he needed was, you know, stick figures from a second grader, because that's how easy it is to show that Karen Reed did it. And I loved Carrie Ann's tweet here. She goes, the stick figures are Trooper Paul and Dr. 𝗄𝗏𝗏. To get to guilty that Karen hit John with her car, you got to believe beyond a reasonable doubt Paul's absurd theory. And if you're having trouble doing that, look at Dr. 𝗄𝗏𝗏, because she didn't believe it either, because she couldn't say that he died from a car, and she's the goddamn medical examiner. Okay. She said, Dr. 𝗄𝗏𝗏 said under cross-examination from Liza Little that, yeah, he could have been hit in the back of the head. Sure, he could have. He could have. All of this is reasonable doubt. All of that. The fact that he could have died in another manner is reasonable doubt, period. So, all right. So what we want to do right now is we're going to listen to Alan Jackson's closing argument here. All right. So, and I am just going to play it all over again from the start and whatever. And as far as David Yanetti's opening too, I would say this. We all loved Wait for Us. Remember that was the line, wait for us? Well, we waited, and it was 6 witnesses. So, like, I would say next time, if you're going to say wait for us, you got to have like 20 witnesses, maybe. I don't know. You got to have more witnesses. They were great witnesses, all 6 of them, but you need more. Okay. So people are saying normal speed, please. Okay. We can do that for you. All right. So let's, play this. And as far as people saying pick a better jury, totally get it. Like, they need just regular people. Like, that jury was too arrogant in hindsight. The fact that they thought they were smarter than the ARCA guys means that you picked wrong here. Okay. And you picked people who are, you heard them. They looked down on Karen Reed because she was drinking and driving. That mattered a lot to them. She was on video buying 4 drinks. You don't see her consume any, but you see her buying 4 different drinks. That's it. So I think a lot of the people just look down on her because of that. And maybe some of these people don't party. You know, they don't go out and drink. They've never drank and drove before, which nobody should do, but a lot of people have done before. Everyone in the house that night was doing it. And it's not, unfortunately, not that unusual. Most people who drink and drive do not get in a car accident, but you only hear about the people who do. Like if they kill somebody or something horrible happens, and that's when, you know, you hear about it. But people do it a lot. They shouldn't, but they do. And like everybody, like I said, everyone in the house is doing it. But like, I saw the jury. There was a lot of squares on the jury. And it just wasn't, they say it's a jury of your peers. Yeah, maybe if you went to Harvard, it would be. Like this was not a jury of, I don't know. I feel like they just need more regular people, if that makes sense. Like it didn't look like a lot. I don't think a single person on that jury has bought a scratch ticket in the last 10 years. You know, I got and I think that's like, people buy scratch tickets. Some people smoke cigarettes. I don't think there was a lot of tattoos on this jury. Nothing. I just feel like it's like you need regular people, because regular people will understand that these people are liars, that the McAlberts are lying to them, you know, that the police are not always honest. You know, like, this is a jury that believed police, that didn't want to take that leap and assume that all these police could be this corrupt, etc. You need street smart people. Exactly. Like, not a lot. Like, I don't think a lot of people there would know what to do with a Keno ticket, you know? And I think that's a problem. So anyway, let's pull up Alan Jackson's closing.
Look the other way. Look the other way. 4 words that sum up the Commonwealth's entire case. 4 words that sum up the hopes of those who have tried to deceive you.
So yeah, and I see people telling jurors, like I see mechanics. You know, a mechanic would be a good person to have on there. Somebody that works with their freaking hands. I feel like I saw a lot of the people that were turned away. There were some, you know, blue collar looking people, some ratchet looking people. Get some ratchets on the jury. Get some ratchets on the jury, because ratchets are part of real life. You want a jury of your peers, 12 randomly selected people, and ratchets don't trust the police. That's what we need. Yeah, and the nurses. Get like 12 nurses. You'll never see, she has nothing to worry about. You get 12 nurses, ever. But like, no more engineers. You know, no more engineers, no more architects, nothing like that. Like, just get regular people that work with their hands. Get plumbers in there. I don't know, anybody that like works for a living, and people that go down and like to have a few drinks after work. Regular blue collar people. That's it. Okay. I saw some of those people coming out of court, and none of them were chosen. They were dismissed one after another. And like, honestly, black people. There wasn't a single black or brown person on this entire jury. There was 2 Asian people and then 15 white people. It was hard not to notice that. There's not a single black or brown person on this entire jury. None. Somebody has, like, one of the sides has to want that, right? I understand the defendant's white, the victim's white. It's somewhat of a white county, you know, but there's got to be something. And I don't know what side would want black and brown people more. I would think it would be the defense, simply because data and statistics show that they are less likely to trust police, which is important in this one, because you have to distrust the institution of the police in order to acquit Karen Read and buy into her theory. Okay. Like, an all white, educated, upper class jury is going to be a tougher sell that the police are guilty, because they don't want to live in those are the type of people that don't want to live in a world where the police are corrupt, because the world is good to them. The world has been pretty good to these people. They live in Westwood. They live in Wellesley. They live in Brookline. Okay. They got nice lives. And if the police are corrupt and our institutions are all corrupt, then our society is this close to falling apart, isn't it? And then they lose all of their nice things. They don't want that. So anyway, back to this. But that's the other thing, Mallory. They also might, and that's what I'm thinking too. You know, a lot of people, that's the problem, is that Karen Read comes across as a rich white lady to some of these people, like, oh, educated, proper, well-dressed, you know, attractive, hotshot attorneys, must be rich, right? Like, so it can go both ways. And they may not like her because of that. They might see her as uppity. It's a tough one. But I think, again, you got to learn from your mistakes. The all-white jury didn't work. It did not work out for Karen Read. It was a loss, because it was a win. When it was a hung jury, that's a win for the Commonwealth. It doesn't get any better than a hung jury for them. They'll never convict her, period. All right, back to this.
Conflicts of interest, doesn't matter. Just look the other way. Magic hairs, magic glass, look the other way. Late night calls and Google searches, falsified affidavits, inverted videos, and butt dials galore. Just look the other way. That's what they want. That's what they're counting on. But the uncontrovertible fact is you have been lied to in this courtroom. And your job is to make sure you don't ever, ever look the other way. Your singular duty is to stare down the evidence and do it unflinchingly and do it unwaveringly. You see, you're the only thing standing between Kieran Reed and the tyranny of injustice. It's a job you didn't ask for, probably a job you didn't want, but it's the greatest responsibility we have as citizens here in America, lest the government stop answering to us and we start answering to the government.
See, this is all great. It's all very poetic, but it's not substantive. Like, he's going to get he's only got an hour. And the people, I've seen people say, oh, it's bullshit. You know, he only got an hour. They should have got more time than that. Agreed. You're preaching to the choir. But at the end of the day, if you get the ball back and you need to score a touchdown because you're down 4 points and a field goal is not going to cut it, and you got to drive down the whole field and you only have 1 minute left and no timeouts, you got to get down the field. Okay. You got to do some quick outs. You got to get out of bounds. You can't just run the ball. Okay. You gotta fit it in. Okay. And this is all great. I love this speech. Again, if we had been a full acquittal here, this would be the greatest speech in American history. But the fact of the matter is, we lost. A tie is a loss. I don't give a fuck. I've seen people say they didn't lose, they tied. A tie is a fucking loss. We were a huge favorite. We were the 2007 Patriots going into this trial. Like, we have all, like, if you were to bet on this case in Vegas, Kieran Reed in acquittal would be the overwhelming betting favorite. Like, the odds of a conviction were very slim, very slim. So a tie for us is a loss. Okay. A loss. So we got to win. It's a win for them. A tie is as good as it gets for them.
And low betide any one of us who might find ourselves in the crosshairs of a Michael Proctor. Preparing for today, I was reminded of a quote. It's a quote about the truth, and I want to share it with you. It is of great importance to set a resolution never to tell an untruth. There is no. So
this is great. See what I mean by poetic? It's great. But the clock's ticking. You got 60 minutes and there's so much shit to get through. So much shit that needs to be reminded of these people. Need to pound it in why each and everything is reasonable doubt. Boom. Get it out. And I love this speech. But clearly this quote that he read to them didn't resonate, did it? Because they were just like, yeah, well, text stream data, and she was at the scene and he was at the scene and they were drinking. So there's that.
Vice so mean, so pitiful, so contemptible. And those who permit themselves to tell a lie once find it much easier to do it a second time and a third. This falsehood of the tongue leads to that of the heart, and in time, it depraves all its good dispositions. What does that mean?
I don't know.
It means that it's been observed that to tell an untruth, to exaggerate, to make a false claim, it's a cancer. One lie begets another, and it's a malignancy that grows over time. And that, folks, is how a cover-up is born. That's how a Massachusetts state trooper says in whispered tones to his friends when he thought no one was looking or listening, how he would make a case, how he would make it cut and dry, no matter the truth, how he would make sure to put, quote, serious charges on the girl. In other words, pin it on the girl. You may ask yourself, how does this happen? How could this happen? It's 2024. Surely people aren't going to come to this courtroom, this hall of justice, and lie to us, just give us false information. They wouldn't do that. They wouldn't try to cover up the truth. The Alberts, the McCabe's, Higgins, Lank, Michael Proctor, 𝗫𝗎 𝗪𝗠, Brian Tully. You don't have to wonder if they would lie to support their narrative. You need only wonder how many times they did lie. Over and over and over, they and others were caught deceiving you. Big things, small things, it didn't really matter. They feared nothing. They'll look you in the eye and deny phone calls. They'll deny secret meetings. They'll claim that calls are butt dials and butt dials are answered.
So again, this is all good stuff. I love it all. They might not even remember what they're talking to, what he's talking about here. You know what I mean? And there's so much stuff. I get it. but explain how each of those is an example of reasonable doubt. Just stress reasonable doubt, dude. Like, could this have been, our theory is that Cameron Reed didn't do it. The ARC expert said that she couldn't have done it, right? Somebody else had to have done it. Could it have been the people inside the house? We sure think so. This is not how the things that they were doing afterwards. This is not how innocent people behave. Innocent people have reasonable explanations for their behavior after a murder. These people don't. The butt dials. Explain what the butt dials were. See what I'm saying? Like, he's going on. This is all good stuff. But it's just like, explain how all of this is an example of, reasonable doubt. Unfortunately, you got to spell it out for them. You heard Ronnie. You heard what he said. That's the crowd. That, as dumb as the people in that room were, based on the way he described them, you have to win them over. This is the system that we have. Okay, so you got to spell it out for them. And this apparently to them was not effective. Like, it's like, so you gotta, this is kind of like your last chance. Again, I'm with them. This would have been the awesomest speech ever had we won. Oh, by the way, let me read some turtle chats here before we go on. And I know I missed a few from last night because there was so many last night trying to read up with this. But today, I believe, is the 16th. And let me just make sure. All right. Let's see. All right. Let's see. Today the 16th. Today's the 16th, right? Because I think I might have missed some last night. I think I read Closet Babies, DC, 𝗫𝗵, Nicole, Anonymous, JJ. Did I read these? Okay. I think a couple of these were from last night that I missed. We missed JJ for $5. Says, no shade to prior jury. The defense should have honed in on people who think analytically for a living and or specifically point out to the jury how they're showing reasonable doubt throughout the trial, not just in opening and closing statements. But they can't pontificate. All you can do during a trial is question these people. You can't be like, see, jury, that's reasonable doubt. What he said right there. You have to save that for the end. And that's kind of the hard part that they have. Like, how awesome would it be to introduce that video into trial of driving by Fairview? Because again, your everyday person sees that video and you're like, oh yeah, no fucking way. But there's no way to get that into evidence, man. It's so frustrating. Let's see. Next one we have Sleepless Sleuth sends $10 and says, how can they get not guilty on 1 and 3, but not on 2? Kind of doesn't make any sense to me. That is exactly what I said, Sleepless Sleuth. It's just like, there's no way it wasn't on purpose if she did it. There's no way. It's either all or nothing. So thank you very much for that one. Mary B sends $5 and says, how interesting that some jurors describe the exculpatory evidence as distractions. They did exactly what Alan Jackson said the prosecution wanted them to do. They looked the other way. You're absolutely right about that. Kristen, I believe last night, sent $10 and says, recommendation, zero in on the main villain being the police. The evidence of their bias and botched investigation is factually overwhelming, that it gives jurors permission to conclude that we can't identify who killed John O'Keefe. That's a good point. Maybe that's is like, yeah, like instead of trying to, drive home that like Brian Higgins did this and Brian Albert did it and Colin Albert did it and blah, blah, blah. Point out that like, it's the police's job to figure this out. And they didn't do that. They're the bad guys here. They're the villains more than anyone else. Kara Reed once said that to me, is that she hated Michael Proctor more than any of them. I thought she was going to say Jennifer McCabe. No, it was Michael Proctor, because he was tasked. He's the one that betrayed his oath to the Constitution. And he's the one that betrayed the trust that our society has put in him, that faith. He really betrayed us all by doing that. And he should be ashamed of him. Shame on you, sir. Shame on you, sir. And you know what's, I had a tangent here. I was talking to a cop yesterday, retired Worcester police, at my kid's soccer game. We won, just in case you were wondering. We won. And this guy had some interesting things to say. Okay. And he's like, and I'd never heard this before. But he basically said that, what did he say? Basically said that what stood out to him is that Brian Albert's house should have been a command center that day. Like, especially because he was police. That if a dead cop was found on Brian Albert's lawn and he was truly innocent, the police should have set up a perimeter the entire day. We've talked about this before, how they should have cordoned off that scene. But what is the excuse that a lot of them gave? Well, it was snowing out. It's a blizzard. We can't be out there all day and crime scene tape. Well, come inside. Why didn't Brian Albert invite the state police inside his house to set up the command center in there? Get all the gadgets you need in there, get your computers set up, whatever the hell you guys need to do, whatever command center that you set up for a murder investigation. What better place than inside Brian Albert's house right there? And he's a cop. Like, he should have offered that to them. He should have felt bad that he slept through the whole thing, allegedly, right? Make up for it by offering up your house to the police as a command center for this investigation. Because there was where was the command center? Who was even running this shit? Like, where was Tully all day? Does anyone know where Tully was all day? We know that Proctor and 𝗵𝗂𝗍𝗂𝗃 were getting in their car and they're driving to the hospital. Then they're driving to Dayton. They never went to the scene, at all. We don't know who the fuck was on the CERT team. We know that O'Hara got there at 4:53, but we don't know who was there before that. There should have been a cop there the entire day. And I guess the excuse was, well, it was snowing. Well, then, yeah, I get that. So put a cop inside. So go inside Brian Albert's house and Nicole will make you hot cocoa, right? Just watch out for the blood. That's the real reason that Brian Albert is not stupid. He's not going to invite a bunch of detectives into his house that he doesn't know all of them if there is any sort of evidence in there of a murder. Or Kelleher's house, right? Right across the street. There's cops right there, right next to each other. Set up a command center right there. Offer it up, but they didn't do that. They just let it be. Just let it be. Anyone can walk through it. That's one of the wildest parts about this. Anyway, back to this. Oh, no. I was reading Turtle Chats. Mark Roth sends, let's see. Mark Roth sends $9 and says anonymous as name. Okay. Thank you, sir. Then we got, let's see. Hold on. I want to make sure I got these all. Do we get anonymous? We got that one. Nicole M. L. Bev sends $10 and says, Nicole M. yesterday said, hi, Ronnie. Are there any questions that you have about the case that we can answer for you? I should have asked that last night. Sorry, I missed that. Thank you, Nicole. L. Bev sends $10 and says, why do you refer to the defense evidence as distractions? He wasn't referring to it as that. He was saying, he was speaking for the group. He was saying that was the discussion that was going on in there. It seems that the jury only believed the Commonwealth and disregarded any evidence put on by the defense and didn't give them the same weight. Yeah. And not only the defense, like, they're experts too. They were like, yeah, that guy's just lying. The experts that said that there's no scientific way that this could have happened, he's lying. That'll never happen again. Okay. So whatever. So thank you for that one. Kim sends $10, says, you mentioned that Turtle Boy could have financed 𝗪𝗏. Was the jury aware of Turtle Boy in the court, or was he mentioned in the jury room? If so, how was he mentioned? So I've talked to Ronnie about this before. He's saying that someone in the jury room suggests that I might have paid for 𝗪𝗏. Ronnie said he's not the one that did it. Again, he's reporting about what people heard. In case you couldn't tell from speaking to Ronnie, the impression that I got of him is he's a very nice guy, but he's not I think he's somewhat of an easy to take advantage of person, if you get my drift. I think he's not the kind of guy that goes out of his way to stand up for himself or, you know, passionately push back. And that's what you needed in this situation. And you got rid of 3 people, okay? 3 women, very strongly opinionated women. And I'm trying to get them on the show too. And they're thinking about it after last night. So they were texting me during the show. I got 3 women, all of whom were eliminated on the final day. Okay. One of whom was a lawyer. All right. A lawyer was eliminated. The lawyers are persuasive for a living. They know how the law works. A lawyer was eliminated on the second and last day. You know, another woman that was eliminated, she was making strong facial reactions the entire time that showed her disgust with Michael Proctor. And she told me that she had written in her notebook about the McAlberts, they're all liars. That's what she put. They're all liars. That's what she put during the McAlbert testimony. Like, she was convinced these people are lying. And she's pissed. And she's like, if we were in that room, if me and these 2 other women were in that room, the vote would have been going the other way, because they have strong personalities. And, you know, Ronnie was a very nice guy, but he doesn't have a strong personality, as you saw there. Okay. He's not the kind of guy that, like, the engineer was and the foreman was, and they were kind of leading. They had the more dominant personalities won, and God bless those 3 jurors who I've never spoken to. Christina Rex has spoken to at least one of them. One of them, I have a mutual friend with another one, and she's very hesitant to come forward and speak. And then there's the nurse, who I'd love to speak to. The nurse said the nurse is, she was cute too. And, you know, it's like she showed no facial reactions. The nurse during the trial, I didn't know she was a nurse till afterwards. She was one I was a little bit worried about. I'm like, who is holding this up? And I'm like, could it be that one? And I'm like, I don't think it was her. I don't think it was, but maybe I could see a world in which she was the one that was guilty. Like the foreman, I never saw coming. The foreman, I was convinced was solid. If you go back and read my tweets, I'm like, that guy's a not guilty voter. Not even the least bit worried about him. I looked at the engineer. I'm like, not the least bit worried about that guy. That guy's an egghead. He's too smart to know this shit. You know, I was worried about some of the younger women. And because I'm like, that seems to be the demographic that doesn't like Karen Reed. But clearly not, I was completely wrong in my assessment of that. So thank you for that one. Let's see here. Next up, let's see. Did we get Susan? There's this. I think I read Susan's last night. Okay. Next up, we have, I read L. Bev's, Nicole M's, Anonymous, JJ, Sleepless. Okay, cool. All right. Nikki sends $25. Says, what does Karen Reed's defense look like without third-party defense strategy? Do they still focus on the butt dials, dog data, and all, or is that all out? I mean, that's a good question. Let's suppose we didn't even mention the word McAlberts or anything like that. Like, let's suppose they didn't make any suggestions that the McAlberts killed John O'Keefe. The problem with that is that it's going to be human nature for the jurors to say, well, somebody killed him. If it wasn't her, then who was it? So either way, you're going to imply that the McAlberts are behind this, right? You have to. So I don't know how they get around that, but I think that, you know, so again, her question, which is a very good question, says, what does Karen Reed's defense look like without third-party defense strategy? Well, I think that it wouldn't include the Google search, right? It could include, it would include the Apple Health data showing him going up and down 3 flights of stairs, simply because Karen Reed's car doesn't have 3 flights of stairs. And you don't even have to say he's in the McAlbert's house. Like, he was in he was somewhere. I don't fucking know. He wasn't in my car though, because I don't have stairs in my car. So that's one thing that you could mention without even blaming the McAlberts. You could mention obviously the ARCA experts. Like, she didn't do this. It's inconsistent with that. Doesn't make any sense. You could mention the dog bites. Absolutely. That's still fair game with or without Chloe. You could do that without blaming Chloe. You could infer that there is a dog in that house that has bitten people before for sure. But those are dog bites, and Karen Reed's car doesn't have teeth. So that's more reasonable doubt that something else caused these injuries. There's just no explanation for it whatsoever. There's no taillight found at 7 o'clock. That's a big thing. There's no freaking taillight, period. Maybe the cops had no suspects. Maybe they couldn't figure it out. Maybe there's a lot of political pressure to arrest someone. Maybe the McAlberts are, you could say that. Well, maybe the McAlberts are completely innocent. Maybe they didn't do this. But Karen Reed didn't do it either. I don't know who fucking did it, but it's not my job to figure out who did it. My job is to defend my client, Karen Reed, here. And the facts of the matter say that this woman couldn't have done it because guess what? There was no taillight there. And there was no taillight there at 7, but there was taillight found over the course of the next 3 weeks. Why? Because there was so much political pressure. Just blame it all on the police. You can blame it on the police without blaming the McAlberts, and just say, well, the police had so much political pressure because they got a dead cop on their hands. And the Boston police chief happens to live in goddamn Canton too, of course, Copland. And there was a lot of pressure to arrest someone for this. And it's hard to do that without taillight. And that's where the taillight planting came in. And our client is innocent. Because there's no suspects in the OJ thing, but he got away with it. It's like, who the fuck else did it? And that's the way a lot of these murder trials work. It's like, okay, well, if it wasn't you, then who was it? And there's got to be somebody else that you can blame. There has to be somebody else. Or else, what are you going to say? Like every good not guilty acquittal thing, blame someone else. Casey Anthony blamed her father. Caitlin Connolly, I've been reading up that one, blamed Mary Yoder's husband and son. I don't know who the fuck OJ blamed. The mafia? Is that what he blamed? I mean, even Robert Tellis over the summer, he had a crazy theory, but at least he had to blame someone, because or else they're going to look right at you. Anyway, next up. Trisha sends $25, goes, you should be so proud that you got the first interview with the juror. I can't even imagine what mainstream media is even thinking right now. Well, thank you, Trisha. Even the haters have to admit that I scooped it. This is real journalism, folks. This is real. I got what they couldn't get. I didn't even ask him. Going into yesterday, I didn't even know if he was going to use his real name and show his face on video. I didn't want to ask him that because I didn't want to make it. I thought he was going to, but I thought that if I asked him like, hey, are you going to use your real name and go on video? He might say something like, oh, well, yeah, I didn't even think of that. Maybe I shouldn't. I didn't want to give him any chance to like overthink it and not do it. So if he just showed up and came on camera, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And all I had to do was ask, and I didn't chase him down. I apologize. He did not chase me down. I got him. I got a tip in August. I've gotten the names of like 4 or 5 jurors. Okay. And I've tried to reach out to a few of them. The foreman I tried to reach out to on the first day after I got his name. And the only one who has reached out to me is the alternate, Pam Beasley. Okay. She reached out to me. The one that was eliminated on the final day. This juror, I had like somebody messaged me and like, I work with Ronnie. Like he's on the fucking jury. And I'm like, can you get me his email? And she did. And I emailed him and I wasn't expecting to hear back. And he emailed me back the next day and it's like, yeah, sure, we'll talk. And, offered to do it. I hooked 𝗲𝗄𝐶𝗶𝗄𝗆 up with him. 𝗲𝗄𝐶𝗶𝗄𝗆 kind of misrepresented clearly the things that he said on there. And, and then I'm like, after the thing came out with the SJC, I just hit him up. I haven't talked to him in a few months, and I hit him up, and he's like, yeah, sure, I'll come on. I'm like, yeah, all you got to do is ask sometimes. All you got to do is ask. And so I got like all these jurors who have come to Christina Rex and stuff like that. They're all anonymous, which is okay, I guess. But coming on and showing your face is a completely new, different level. It's a new ball game. So that's a scoop, man. That shows that I'm a real journalist. Whether that it's a hard pill for these people to swallow because I'm so outrageous and I'm being charged with witness intimidation and blah, blah, blah. But that interview last night killed a lot of the critique of me that I'm not a real journalist. Okay. Because I was pretty professional. That's a lot of the feedback I've gotten from people is that you kept a straight face. You didn't argue with him. You let him talk. You let him answer questions. And I did because I wasn't there to win an argument with him. That's not what I was there to do. I wasn't there to disagree with them. I was there because I wanted to learn. I wanted to learn about what happened in that room. That's what I want to find out. And he can tell me that. And losing access to him, pissing him off is not something that helps me at all, helps any of us at all. It doesn't advance the interests of justice at all if I alienate Ronnie and make him mad or call him out on things or degrade him in any way. So I would treat him with nothing but respect. Even if he had voted guilty, I would do the same thing. Okay. I wouldn't criticize him. I would just ask him questions because I want him to tell me what happened in that room. That we all want to know what happened in that room. And so I did. And I think we all learned a lot from that. And I know a lot of other YouTube content creators are going to talk about this interview now, but it'll be interesting to see if the mainstream media does as well. I mean, Turtle Boy got the juror. Turtle Boy did that. You can air that footage if you want. They're going to have to ask my permission, but they can air some of that footage. I'll give them permission to do that. Absolutely. It's free promotion. Why not? If they want to. We'll see. We'll see. I don't know if it's old news for them. I don't know. But I forget what I was going to say next. It'll come back to me. I have so much to say. Okay. Back to this. It says here, let's see. Okay. Shauna sends $50. Says, great job with the interview last night. It shows the defense needs to spend less time on the conspiracy and more time calling out what constitutes reasonable doubt. Here. But again, the conspiracy all outlines the reasonable doubt. And they just have to remind them after every time, like, that's reasonable doubt. That's reasonable doubt. That's reasonable doubt. That's reasonable doubt. Boom. All of it. Brittany sends $5, says, hello, Turtle Boy. The simple thing the defense needs to do is zoom in on the side of the taillight in the 5 a.m. video. Only then will the jury notice it is not broken like it is a laser later in the Sally port. Also, are the sanctions related to Proctor or the nephew? The sanctions that the Commonwealth is trying to get is because they're mad that it's not because of the nephew, because they were allowed to mention the nephew thing because that happened in court. Okay, so nothing in there, but nothing that they mentioned about the nephew was under a protective order. However, what was under a protective order was that text messages from Proctor. Okay, because we had that same text message, and you might notice our motion to dismiss does not contain that. It's redacted, and I don't know what the punishment for that. It just shows that Hanky is not even the least bit concerned about justice for John O'Keefe if that's how he's spending his time. Like, I'm going to get sanctions on them for putting this text message out there to Michael Proctor. Oh, God forbid we make Michael Proctor look bad. Yeah, that's going to help John O'Keefe. Sure. Talk about distractions. All right. Yeah. And as far as zooming in on the side, it's like you can't, but that's not how trials work. You call witnesses up and you ask them. So a good witness to ask about that would be Nicholas Barros. You zoom in on the taillight at 507 and you go, does this look like an accurate portrayal of what the taillight looked like at 507 or at 4:15 p.m. when you saw it in Bill Reed's driveway? And he's going to say, yeah, it looked like that. It was cracked, but not destroyed. And then you show him a picture of the car in the Sally port and you go, did it look like that when you saw it? And I'm telling you, he's going to say no. I'm telling you right now, Karen Reed defense team, you have to cross-examine 𝗃𝗃𝗧𝘂𝗏. You also have to cross-examine the tattoo lady, Dr. Stonebridge. They didn't cross-examine her. You got to cross-examine her. She knows the truth. Go back and listen to her testimony. Nurse Kim was talking about this morning. She said a lot of exculpatory things for Karen Reed. Then you got to cross-examine Kerry Roberts, because Kerry Roberts got away with saying some shit unchallenged about, like, wait a minute, she confessed to you at 5 o'clock that she hit him? What? That's new. Okay. And the tow truck driver. Yeah. Can we get the tow truck driver? Where'd that guy go? All right, back to this. Larry from 50s Lounge sends $5 and says, what defense attorney is responsible for the jury believing defense witnesses as deceptive, but viewed Jen McCabe as neutral? What defense attorney is responsible? I don't understand the question. So thank you, Larry. If you're going to ask a question, just ask a question. I don't know what defense attorney is responsible for. I don't fucking, what kind of question is that? Just ask the fucking question. Especially for $5. Thank you, Larry. $10 for Bite Me Chico. Bite Me Chloe sends $10. Sorry. And says, Turtle, since a juror contemplated whether or not you might be the one who funded the 𝗺cie guys, wouldn't that indicate they've been following the case either prior or during the trial? It certainly seems that way to me. I mean, I was briefly mentioned by Jennifer McCabe once, but there's no way that none of these people knew who I was before. No fucking way. It's impossible. And if they don't like me and then they associate me with Karen Reed, they're not going to like her either, are they? All right. Jill Daniels Suntan Oil sends $25 and says, award-winning journalism. Do you think new shit will be coming out in Karen's motion to dismiss? I do. I think a lot of new shit's going to be coming out. Stuff that's in the protective order that I don't even know. It's fucking insane. You can't mention this shit. They gave them all this evidence. They gave us a shitload of, as part of the 𝗺cie thing, they gave us a bunch of text messages from all these people. And it's wild. And a lot of it takes place during the grand jury when Karen Reed is being grand juried, and we can't see it. These were busy beavers during the grand jury. It's just, I don't understand why Mark Betterow never understands it either. He's like, what is going on in the state with impounded stuff? Everything's impounded for some reason. Nothing's public. It gets crazy. Like, we impound stuff when sensitive private information is on there, you know, information about children and whatever, medical records, etc. Not like Michael Proctor said something inappropriate. Like, what? Kerry Roberts said something inappropriate. Anyway, Wendy sends Jennifer sends $10 and goes, I agree with the importance of the closing argument, but after listening to Ronnie, I wonder how the jurors might be prepped during the opening statement. Again, so this is another thing we need to cut down on. The length of turtle chats. Maybe we need to get my web guy to come on and put like a character limit. You cannot write a whole paragraph. You got to wrap. Speaking of wrap it up, in the turtle chats, you got to wrap it up. So I'm only reading the first couple sentences for turtle chats. So Jennifer sends $10 and says, I agree with the importance of the closing argument, but after listening to Ronnie, I wonder how the jurors might be prepped during the opening statement. I remember Yannetti imploring the jurors to wait for the defense. I wonder if it'd be helpful to encourage them to write down every time they doubt something from testimony and circle it. That's a good idea. That's a good idea. Thank you. Wendy sends $10. It goes, the defense impeached almost every single state witness. None of Proctor's reports were correct. What the fuck did they think was happening up there? Good question. Bill sends $25. It goes, fill the jury with frontline healthcare workers. It was telling when he said how him and the other healthcare workers all knew the injuries weren't from a vehicle. Well, the physician's assistant didn't get that memo. And, Ronnie kind of wavered on that apparently. So, but the nurse didn't. So there's that. Bill sends, apologize, Gianetti's earworm sends $10 and goes, Doc, I learned today there's a difference between distractor and distraction. The word is unusual. What, if anything, is your take on that specific word? I'd never heard the word before yesterday, so thank you very much. Renee sends $5 and goes, attention jurors, John O'Keefe wasn't hit by a car. His injuries were not the result of a motor vehicle accident. Correct. Nicole sends $5. Says, love AJ and his approach, but I think 𝗃𝗍𝘂 could be more impactful for the closing statement. He's great with words and it makes everything so easy for the average person to understand. Let's pump the brakes on that a little bit. Let's not abandon Alan Jackson here. Alan Jackson's phenomenal. Okay. We all love Bob 𝗃𝗍𝘂. Fighting Bob's great. Okay. But I think this is still Alan Jackson's. He's still the cook. Let the man cook. He's still Alan Jackson. Okay. Let's not lose our faith in him, because he's the one that got us here. He's the one that revolutionized this case. When he came on, he is a fucking genius. He's a beautiful attorney. He's masterful. He's an artist out there. He's an artist. 𝗃𝗍𝘂's great, but this is Alan Jackson. This is him. This is his cook. He's the cook. Let him cook. Okay. This is his case. Let him get we're following Alan Jackson to the end of the earth, period. I love Bob 𝗃𝗍𝘂. I love Bettero. I love David Yannetti. I love Eliza Little. Alan Jackson is the captain of the ship, period. Done. Next. Carrie sends $10, goes to us. This is a case of injustice, corruption, good over evil, etc. We see this powerful family doing wrong and getting away with it, and an innocent woman taking the hit. To the jury, it's a drunk driving homicide case. We need to remove our emotions from it, I guess. You're so fucking... That's Carrie from Twitter. She's so wise. It's so true, though. Truer words have never been spoken here. We're so invested in this because we see it for what it is. And it's this crazy story of injustice, corruption, good over evil, bad guys, good guys, etc. And then these juries are just like, well, she was drunk and there's a car there and he was there. So this is a drunk driving situation. Like, that's fucking wild. And I don't know how to overcome that with some of these people, but luckily she'll never be convicted. So there's that. You know, I would like to think that if they have a mistrial this time around, if they can't convict her this time around, that they won't go for a trial 3. But I mean, that they will have learned their lesson from Sean Ellis. And then we're getting pretty close to re-election season for Michael Morrissey. So, you know, maybe that changes, but I don't know. Jolie sends $10, goes, the juror interview was just plain scary. Karen Reed dropped him off and he was found dead on the lawn. So she's guilty. What logical person puts someone's fate in that belief system? Even so, I am so happy that you got the juror interview because you certainly earned it. Well, thank you very much, Jolie. And again, that's the kind of reason that's why they want me in jail. Let's not forget that. They want me in jail because I get scoops like that and I am a threat to the system, not a physical threat, but like the fact that I can do stuff like that no other, reporter can do. And that annoys him. Oh, I forgot. I remember what I was going to say before too. I'm also better content. Like, there's a reason I'm killing it. And it's not just because I'm handsome and speak so well, although that doesn't hurt. The reason that I'm able to be successful with this whole thing is because of the format, because I know how to create content that people want to consume. And the fact of the matter is that Boston 25 News fucked up the Karen Reed interview, period. Right? Like, they got Karen Reed. I don't have. Karen Reed will not, I have not asked her to do an interview before the trial, nor would I. I know the answer would be no. Because, and for good reason, because that would hurt her. Like, they want to tie her to me as much as possible. That would not help her. I am not viewed as a neutral media source because I'm not. I'm not neutral. Right? I am extremely biased towards the defense because I'm biased towards the truth. Okay? So I am, it would not be a good, that's exactly what they want. They want me to interview her. They want me to do a softball, whatever. Like, they want that. So Ted Daniels gets the scoop. This is the biggest murder case in the country, and you don't have the attorney. You got the defendant herself who's willing to go on and give you this interview. And wow, what a scoop. What a pickup for Ted. And that's great. And what did we get? What the fuck did we get? We got 3 little videos spaced apart over 24 hours. Oh, we're going to give you this 5-minute nugget here. Then we'll give you this 2-minute nugget. Then we'll give you another 5-minute nugget. And that's it. That's it. That's the whole thing. Now, apparently, like, they released this thing that we're going to release the whole hour-long unedited thing. Why didn't you start with that? We'll make the clips. Believe me, the YouTube content creators, we'll clip it for you. We'll do that. We got the clips down. That's what we're good at, clipping. Right? You just play the whole fucking thing. That's it. Start to finish. And that's why people like my content. That's why people liked last night's interview, because it was raw and unedited. It was 3 hours straight of just me and a juror ask with no questions off limits. Live. Nothing gets edited. And the chat is very important. This is an element of, this is how people consume content nowadays, with a live chat. That matters a lot now. People want the ability to be, this didn't exist 20 years ago. You know, people used to just put stuff on TV and then you read over the next course of days how people react to it. Now people can react live to shit. And you can see how the people consuming your content are reacting to the things that you're saying, and you can take questions directly from them. They get to be part of it. You know, this medium has never existed before. The YouTube live chat stream, Rumble live, whatever these streaming services are that allow a live chat and for you to interact with your viewers, has revolutionized the way the content is created. It's a superior way to create content because you get to be part of it. You're no longer just a passive person who, just sits and watches and, you're screaming at the TV, ask this question, ask this question. Now you can type in, ask this question, and I might see it and I might ask that question. Or you could put some money in the machine and then I'll definitely ask the question, as long as it hasn't been asked 500 times. So Ted Daniel got and when I said Ted Daniel, I mean Boston 25 News got the biggest. He earned it too, because he's done a good job. He has done a good job as far as mainstream media does. He's been the best of all of them, and he's a cool guy too. I like Ted. But his station got the big scoop, and they just fucked it up, man. They fucked it up. Like, they just blew it. They blew it because they don't understand. There's too many boomers running these goddamn networks that don't understand. Like, dude, this is how people consume content now. YouTube live chats. We're killing it out here. We're killing it. All right. Anyway, back to this. Okay. So that was Jolie. Next one. Anonymous sends $10, goes, when you talked about reasonable doubt, you said, did Adam Lally convince the jury that there was no other reasonable explanation? Didn't the jurors say last night that they were talking about other possibilities of what happened? Like that he slipped and fell? Isn't that enough right there to be a not guilty vote? Well, he was a not guilty vote. But apparently no one else was talking about that. And I hate to say it, but Adam Lally, based on the feedback that I heard, was effective. Right? I mean, we have to concede that. His method worked. Just overwhelm them with 1 million freaking witnesses. Talk about the drinking a lot. Emphasize the drinking. And then have everybody go through every piece of taillight and talk about this taillight was found this day. And, there's taillight there. And here's a chart, an Excel data chart of tech stream stuff. And apparently it worked. Apparently it worked, So maybe it's a good thing we got 𝗵𝗂𝗍. Maybe he'll go too far. All right, next up. Yeah, so there's that. Sandra sends $25 and goes, at first listening to the juror, I was pissed, like I didn't want to listen to the insanity, but afterwards I realized how important the interview was. You've done something amazing. You give Karen Reed's defense insight on the average juror's way of thinking. This is exactly how it should have gone. Exactly, Sandra. You get me. You get me. That is exactly how I saw it. And I'm sure that Karen Reed's defense team watched that interview last night. How could they not? How could they not listen to that and be like, well, that's very interesting? Especially, if, God forbid, we're all hoping that Mark Bettero officially gets added to the dream team, because we know that Mark Bettero consumes content on YouTube, doesn't he? And I'm sure, and he's got such a brilliant analytical brain that I'm sure he will definitely listen to every word Ronnie said and figure out a way to use that to their advantage in trial number 2. So thank you for that one. We have $10 from Lori here. Says the defense needs to stress reasonable doubt from the opening statement to closing. Here. A couple cash apps. Again, my cash app is $ Uncle Turtle Boy here. We have Tammy sent this at 1:15 last night. She goes, sorry, I sent a request. She sent me a request for $10. Tammy did last night. And she goes, great interview last night. Thank you, Tammy. So thank you very much, ma'am. Next up. How do we get out of this? There it is. Mama She sends $50 and goes, had to catch last night on replay. Great job. Well, thank you very much, Mama She. We love you. Ashley sends $5 and goes, love you, Curtis. There you go, Curtis. Love you. L Woods sends $25 and she says, Paul or Carrie T updates. Oh, yes, actually. So I think I might drop the Paul story this week because Paul, let me see. You know, apparently Paul has upset the wrong person because this person, they're pissed at Paul and they're telling a lot of tea to me about Paul O'Keefe. And what it's, again, it's not just personal drama either with Paul O'Keefe. It affects the trial. Okay. It affects things that he's done during the trial, you know, and I think that it might be time. I was going to hold off on this one, but I think maybe this week might be the time to spill a little tea because Paul knows what he's been doing. You know, Paul knows he's been a bit of a douche, you know, so, you know, and I'm sure Erin is very curious about what I've been talking about, right? Because her family, you see Big Fat Beth, Megabeth in the back there in closing arguments. Like Megabeth went on national TV. She was the spokesperson for Paul O'Keefe's family. How's she going to feel about when this comes out? I mean, she might feel a little silly, you know? So, you know, we got receipts. Paul knows I got receipts. And this person, the source, is willing to come forward in person. So, you know, I hope Paul's thinking hard about who he's been a douche to. Just think about that. You know, just think about that, Paul. Anyway, we'll talk later, Paul. Anyway, so there's that. Oh, wait, back to the cash apps. Steph sends $10 and goes, was the foreman definitely a guilty, even being a PA? Yes, he was. That's correct. Thank you, Stephanie. Mark sends $10 and goes, Karen retrial equals OJ trial plus WWE plus Jerry Springer. I mean, not quite, because it's like, first of all, it's not a game to me. Like, it's like this is a serious thing. But it's definitely more, you're right. It is more interesting than the OJ trial. The OJ trial was like, bro, come on. That was a domestic violence situation that this motherfucker chopped her up and killed her. And the guy that was unfortunately over there returning something at that time. And he had to go too. So, whereas this one is just way more crazy, like just wild. So I agree with you on that one, Mark. Thank you. Next up. EMC sends $10 and goes, Higgins, the bar, his Jeep, and his timeline, guilty. Okay, thank you, EMC. Steph sends $10 and goes, Google Bowden defense. That's what they should use. Okay, I'll have to Google that later. Thank you. Sue sends $5 and goes, you should help AJ write his closing statement. No, I wouldn't be that presumptuous that he should. But I know that, you know, Alan Jackson, you know, appreciates what I do and value, because he gets it. You know, we've had talks before. He's a really nice guy. both of her attorneys who I've had long talks with, him and David Yannetti before, they're really nice people. And they're very complimentary to me because you could tell that they appreciate not just that I'm standing up for their client, but that I bring it. And like, they've never seen journalism like this before. And I bring receipts, you know? So there's that. And I've written about some of David Yannetti's clients before. Somebody brought this up to me. It was like somebody brought up about somebody named Courtney 𝗃𝗃𝗃. And I'm like, who the fuck is that? And it's some chick I wrote about in 2014. She was setting up these swinger parties for dudes and getting all these whores to go to this hotel room in Auburn. And they lived in Hubbardston. I call it like the Hubbardston Madame. And she would get these rich guys to go to hotels, and she would get all the whores to come down, and everyone would just fuck. Okay. And they had a great time. And the whores expected to get paid because they're whores. Okay. And she just pocketed the cash. She just never paid them. So all these whores, she got all these rich guys to pay for all these whores to come down and have orgies at the Hojo in Auburn. And nobody got paid except for her and her boyfriend. And so then it was like 10 years ago. Like, I totally forgot about it. And so then I Googled her, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that bitch. And she was the pimp. Yeah. And so I Googled her because I'm like, okay, let's see where that case went, because it was 10 years ago and it was only recently adjudicated. And this is what comes up when I search it. Look who it is. Look who it is. It's David Yannetti. It's David Yannetti. He represented the other guy. That's the Madame. And there was two of them. They were both doing it. And David Yannetti has every reason not to like me because I've written about his clients in a negative way before. I've mocked them and he still is complimentary to me. So there's that. So thank you. Let's see. Sarah sends $10 and goes, why no chain of custody, no cert, and no pictures? Exactly, Sarah. Thank you. Okay, cool. So let's get back to the Alan Jackson closing and my very slight critiques of this and how I think constructive criticism, we'll call it.
Show you a video and tell you left is right and right is left. They'll magically turn 3 pieces of plastic into 5 right before your eyes. And even when they're caught with their own lies, they won't blink, they don't sweat. They'll just look you in the eye and demand, pay no attention. You folks look the other way. Ladies and gentlemen, there was a cover-up in this case, plain and simple. You'll surely say to yourself, I don't want to believe it. I don't want to believe that can happen in our community. But sadly, over the past 8 weeks,
true,
you've seen it right before your eyes. So how does a cover-up happen? How could that happen? Well, let's count the ways, shall we? Handpick your investigator. Make sure it's someone we know, someone on our side. Keep him close. Offer him help. Offer him a gift. Have secret friends and family meetings. Get your story straight. Delete your call history. Make mysterious phone calls at 2:22 a.m. Delete Google searches.
Okay. So again, we all know this is true. We all know this, but now you're telling the jury that in order to acquit Karen Read, you have to believe all this happened. You have to believe all this happened. You have to believe that they handpicked the investigator, that it wasn't just Michael Proctor's turn on the Rolodex. Okay. You have to believe that they coordinated all this. I believe it. I believe all that because I'm fully invested in this and I know it very well. My heart is in it. I fully believe it. Okay. And, you know, at the end of the day, though, now you're telling the jury that this is what you have to believe in order to acquit my client, right? Of course, we believe that happened, but that's a pretty big bar. You're telling the jury that they have to accept all this. And it's information overload. That's a good way to say it. Everything he's saying right now, taking 3 pieces of taillight and turning it into 5. What was that? What are you referencing there? There was 10 weeks of testimony. What are you talking about? Oh, right. That's right. Tully said that, right? Okay. There's just so much shit, you know? And I guess that's my point here.
Monitor police activity. Get rid of evidence. Get rid of your dog. Destroy your phones. Destroy your SIM card. For the investigator, decide on a narrative early on. Don't go to the crime scene. Don't take witnesses in for questioning. Question all the witnesses together, ignore witnesses who don't fit your narrative, allow friends and family to contact those same witnesses, don't record interviews, write vague and false police reports, omit witnesses' names, omit witnesses' interviews altogether. Don't photograph the evidence, don't conduct any forensics, don't document the evidence, don't document the logs, don't create any logs whatsoever, and don't maintain a chain of custody. Keep all the evidence in the hands of one person and then manipulate that evidence, including videos. Don't turn over videos, invert videos. Turn 4:16 p.m. into 5:30 p.m.
Turns 4:16 p.m. into 5:30 p.m. This is like a pop quiz. It's like, it's almost like you're asking them, what am I referring to there? Because it's 10 weeks of testimony. What are you talking about? Turn 4:16 into 5:30 p.m. You know, it just, there's so much information, and I get it. You're trying to pack so much into an hour, you know, and that's a big thing too, because they weren't there for all the pretrial stuff. If you followed the pretrial stuff, you're much more likely to believe this is a conspiracy, because they were so insistent on 5:30. They're like, that wasn't a mistake. It was 5:30. And then all of a sudden they're like, oops, Scrivener's error after the Dayton police report came out and they got caught. No. Oh yeah. Oops. You know? So the jury wasn't around for any of that shit. Like, unless you've been on this ride since the beginning, and have seen the evolution of how remember they had a 3-point turn theory? Like, I feel like it's been ages. Remember the 3-point turn? They said it was death by 3-point turn for like my first 6 months of covering this shit. And then they're like, oh yeah, forget about that. The jury never heard about a 3-point turn theory. We did. We did. It's like if you had heard that, like, oh yeah, they had a 3-point turn theory, and then something called 𝗃𝗏𝗺 published article number 73 in the Canton cover-up series showing that it was actually the wrong taillight if it was a 3-point. So then they abandoned ship on that one because they're just making shit up as they go along. But none of that could be introduced into evidence. So they're fighting with their hands tied behind their back there, you know?
And affidavits. Turn 3 pieces of taillight into 5 pieces of taillight. Delete 42 minutes of surveillance footage, hide personal relationships, make this case cut and dry, and ensure the homeowner, quote, never sees any shit because he's a Boston cop. But most importantly, pick your patsy and pin it on the girl. It's not that it could happen. It's that every single one of those things I just mentioned did happen right in front of you. But this sort of injustice can't happen in a vacuum. So what about the prosecution? What about the Commonwealth? What does it look like when the government picks a narrative and then tries to form a prosecution around the narrative instead of the other way around? Looks a lot like this. If you don't have actual evidence, just throw every single thing you can against the wall to see what sticks. Drag her through the mud and make sure you attack her character. And that's what you saw in this case. The Commonwealth spent much of their time and resources trying to vilify Karen Read. They desperately resorted to calling witnesses to talk about Karen Read and John O'Keefe's arguments. They even stooped so low as to call the children and put them through this ordeal. All to say that John sometimes got upset because Karen was too kind, too nice, spoiled them too much. Their arguments illustrated what anybody could imagine is a normal set of ups and downs for any couple. Even on January 28th, they talked it out, they communicated, they worked out their issues, and they had a nice, affectionate evening out with their friends. And you don't have to take my word for it. Pull the tape, as they say. Look at the videos. C.F. McCarthy, Waterfall.
Again, I'm not telling Alan Jackson how to do his job, but remind the jury, right, that in order to convict her of murder, you have to believe that she did this on purpose. The children's testimony, suggests that they didn't. That her own text messages that day suggest that they didn't. That they were happy. The 𝗃𝗏𝗧𝘂𝗍 testimony, even the McAlbert's testimony, suggested that they seemed fine. There is no evidence whatsoever that John and Karen were in a fight going into that day. Period.
What are the words that every single person who testified in this case used about Karen Read and John O'Keefe that night? Getting along, no issues, good mood, happy, affectionate, even lovey-dovey. No issues, no toxicity. They were a loving couple right up into the time Karen Read dropped him off and he walked into 34 Fairview. If an argument with a loved one is a motive for murder, folks, we're all in trouble. Speaking of which, what is the evidence that John went into the house? The Commonwealth will tell you, undoubtedly, no, he never went in the house. And they'll point to certain witnesses who they say didn't see him go in. Well, the question you have to ask yourself is, can you rely on that? First, these are all people who are related to or committed to the Alberts in some way or another.
This is good.
That all-powerful Canton family, it's easy to say, I didn't see something, because how can that really be challenged? Some actually may not have seen John walk into the house. They were in the kitchen, as you recall, from Nicole. Third, at least one witness, Brian Higgins, forgot his narrative, at least for a second, and he admitted a man did, in fact, come into the house. And when he was caught and asked to describe that man, he had to. It was a little bit vague. You remember what he said. He was tall with dark hair. That was a telling slip of the tongue by Brian Higgins. But what's the real evidence of the unbiased data?
Again, that's so true. It's just like, I think a different way to say that is to just say that they will tell you that all the witnesses allege that John O'Keefe never came inside the house. But Brian Higgins testified that a tall man walked into the house, and that man was not Brian Albert. So who was that man? Who was that? Who is the person that he identified at a grand jury proceeding, another grand jury proceeding? Who was that man? Could that man have been John O'Keefe? John O'Keefe was a tall man. He was 6'2" tall. And that is reasonable doubt. If you think that tall man that Brian Higgins testified that he saw go into the house could have been John O'Keefe, then that is reasonable doubt. He could have been in the house because Brian Higgins described someone who looked like John O'Keefe going into the house. That's another way to say that. That's another way to say that.
The data that's not connected to the Albert family. How about John's Apple Health data? It shows that at 12:21 a.m., an important time, John arrived. That's established by the monotonic time clock that you heard about in this trial. It was on his phone, and that represents a huge problem for the Commonwealth. It shows that he took 80 steps and ascended or descended 3 flights of stairs at that time. And that makes perfect sense, doesn't it? It matches. Walks into the house, goes directly to the basement. There's your 80 steps and your descending flights of stairs. The big problem for the Commonwealth.
See, I don't like that. Because now you're saying what he did in there. How does Alan Jackson know what he did in there? That he went down the stairs. Maybe he went upstairs to take a shit. Maybe he went I don't fucking know. It's not Alan Jackson's job to prove what John O'Keefe did when he went in that house. It's not his job to do that. It's his job to put him in the house. Period. The second that he walks in that house and closes the door behind him, Karen Reed is not guilty. The second that happens, it does not matter where John goes inside that house. If he goes upstairs, if he goes downstairs, who hits him doesn't fucking matter because it wasn't Karen Reed. It immediately acquits her the second that they put John O'Keefe inside that house, period. So this is what I mean by you're trying to tell the jury that in order to acquit Karen Reed, well, John O'Keefe had to have gone to the basement first. What if they don't believe that? It's like reason. And then you're implicating the people who are in the basement. Well, they did it. The people in the basement did it, period. And he's talking about the Apple Health data here. Again, I think he gets to it. About the 80 steps. Does he talk about the flights of stairs?
Wealth is he wasn't outside at the car ascending and descending stairs, wasn't climbing on top of the car. So they'll tell you, wait, don't look at the Apple Health data. Look at this other thing.
GPS.
Called Waze. But Rick Green explained that if you apply the 3-minute offset
this is
built into that monatomic time, it aligns perfectly. They don't want you to see that. They don't want you to pay attention. They want you to look the other way.
So again, that's good. The thing that Rick Green says, the monotonic time, whatever, maybe they forgot what that was. Remind them. Apple he did such a good job in the pretrial of explaining the internal clock, the Apple Cocoa internal clock, why it's so accurate. It works on a plane, etc. And just explain that Waze uses GPS. GPS is not as accurate. It has a 3-minute standard deviation that it can move from the time. Okay. It's not as accurate, period. And you got to bring up Karen Reed's phone. Karen Reed's phone did not have him going up and down 3 flights of stairs. right? Did not have her going up and down 3 flights of stairs. We know because they have her phone and they would use that to disprove us, but they can't. So Karen Reed's phone does not show her ascending and descending 3 flights of stairs. That is a powerful piece of evidence that needed to be reminded. Okay. They were not in the same place. They want you to believe that they were standing right next to each other. They were in the car. Then he got out and then she killed. But the phone says different. The phone says they weren't in the same place. And how does the Commonwealth explain that? Well, forget about the Waze thing that they say. Let's talk about how they explain the Apple Health data. Nicholas Guarino wants you to believe that he testified that the up and down stairs motion could come from him moving his phone up and down. Now we didn't offer to you any Apple Health data because we don't have to, because you have common sense. And chances are that a good number of you right now own iPhones. And some of you probably look at your Apple Health data and you have common sense and you know that's not true. You know that you can't move your phone around and cause it to go up and down 3 flights of stairs. And that's the best explanation that they could come up with. If you think that Nicholas Guarino's theory that John's Apple Health data has him going up and down 3 flights of stairs wasn't caused by him moving the phone in the car, that's reasonable doubt. You have reason to doubt. Your doubt of Nicholas Guarino's explanation is extremely reasonable. That is it is an extremely reasonable thing to believe that moving a phone up and down will not cause it to go up and down 3 flights of stairs. He has not proven to you beyond a reasonable doubt that it can do that. We didn't give you an Apple Health expert because we didn't need to, because you have common sense and you know that's ridiculous. You know that's ridiculous. He can't prove that. They didn't bring any experts in either to show that, yeah, that's what causes it to happen. But actually, Rick Green actually testified that he did try it out. He did move his phone up and down flights of stairs. Or he did move his phone up like this. He took it in an elevator. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. Okay? And that's the kind, like, I don't know. That's just what I would say. Again, not telling Alan Jackson how to do his job. But I'm a pretty good fucking communicator too. I might not be a lawyer, but I've obviously, amassed quite a following doing this because I have a way with words and I can take facts and make them and put them in a presentable fashion that people can understand it. So there's that. All right, back to this.
But even more importantly, at approximately 12:32 a.m., someone holding John's phone takes another 36 steps and travels 25 meters. Why is that so important? Because by 12:32 a.m., Karen Reed was gone. She had already left the location. She left at 12:30. Trooper Guarino told you that Karen Reed's phone connected to John's Wi-Fi at what time? 12:36.
This is
It is undisputed in this case that it's a 6-minute drive on a good day from 34 Fairview over to One Meadows. She was gone by 12:30, and John's phone was taking 36 steps and logging 25 meters at 12:32 after she left. So don't be fooled. John walked into that house, after which Karen drove away, and the scientific data all prove it. But also, Ryan Nagel and Heather Maxson prove it. In addition to the Apple Health data, Ryan and Heather both independently testified that they passed Karen's SUV as they drove away after talking to Julie.
And Ricky D'Antano.
Karen was alone in the SUV. John was not with her. He wasn't in the car. He wasn't standing outside the car. He wasn't sitting beside the car. He wasn't laying on the ground beside the car. He was nowhere in sight. There's only one other place that John could have been, and that's in the house. Exactly where the Apple Health data places him. So it all fits. And Ryan was right behind her, remember?
And it all fits. And you can tell them here that we understand that conspiracies are hard to believe. This one's not. You don't have to make any crazy leaps here to think that he was inside that house, because Ryan Nagel, Heather Maxson, and Ricky D'Antano all testified that John wasn't inside the car and he wasn't outside the car. There is only one other place he could be, and that is inside the house, period. So their testimony puts him in the house, and his phone, Apple Health data, puts him inside the house. It doesn't matter what happened when he went inside the house. That's not our burden to prove. Our burden to prove to you is that he went. There is a chance that he went inside that house. If you think there's any chance that he did, that is reasonable doubt. Hammer that home. Unfortunately, these people need that explained to them over and over again.
Staring at her taillights, undamaged, brightly lit. That brings up another difficulty for the Commonwealth, and that's their star witness, Jennifer McCabe. You'll recall that Jennifer McCabe claimed that she was looking out the door, staring at that SUV over and over and over again from 12:29 to 12:50. She was very specific about that time frame. But we know that the SUV was gone from 34 Fairview by about 12:30. Had to be in order to connect to the Wi-Fi at 12:36. So unequivocally, Jennifer McCabe was lying about watching that SUV, and it makes you wonder why. And to add to that deceit, she was also blatantly lying about the calls to John's phone. You remember that colloquy back and forth. She said that every single one of those calls to John's phone during that time was a butt dial. How are those lies connected? And why are they connected? Jennifer McCabe knows. Was she butt dialing John over and over? Or was someone looking for John's phone that went missing?
So you don't need to add that part. This is my critique again. You don't need to add that part about what she was doing. Just ask them. Have you butt dialed someone before? Sure. A lot of people have butt dialed people. Sure. Have you ever butt dialed someone 6 times in a row? That behavior in and of itself is suspicious. She got up there and told you on the stand that she butt dialed them 6 times in a row, but you know that's not true. You know you're not going. No human being with a phone butt dials someone 6 times in a row. So ask yourself, why is she lying? Why would an innocent person, an innocent witness, make up a lie like that? You know that's not true. Why would she lie? I don't know. But the fact that she's dishonest about that, you have to assume that that's not the only thing she's being dishonest about. What is she covering up? We don't know. We don't know what her involvement was in this, but we know that that when witnesses act this suspicious, they're doing it for a reason. Their suspicious behavior in and of itself is reasonable doubt. So you don't have to prove why she was doing that. You don't have to take that next step. That's just my opinion.
Let's talk for a second about what actually happened in the time leading up to everyone going to 34 Fairview. Brian Albert, Brian Higgins show up drunk at the waterfall. They've been drinking in the afternoon. You know about the flirtatious texts that were sent between Karen Reed and Brian. Higgins was clearly pining over Karen, but for her, the flirtation had ran its course. It was done. She was happy and committed to John. You could see that in her actions with John that night. You don't have to guess. Brian Higgins, however, you can see in his actions, he wasn't quite so satisfied and he wasn't done. His text message, well, meaning, what the hell, Karen? What about me? Seemed aggressive, seemed annoyed. He didn't like being ignored. That was pretty clear. So he's 5 or 6 whiskeys deep into the night by this time, and she continued to ignore him. Then oddly, Higgins, who doesn't know John all that well, seems to want to coax John to 34 Fairview. I'll draw your attention to the waterfall tape if you want to take another look at it. It's the 11:57 mark.
Yeah, okay. So JFK is coming in his pants right now when he hears that part, because here's the waterfall part. They talk about Higgins' behavior at the end of that tape when he seems to be getting aggressive towards John.
11:57, 11:58. Take a look at that tape. He's just about to leave. Higgins is just about to leave. He points over at John and he motions for him. Come on, come with me. And then at 12:20, he texts him, you coming here? This is a person he doesn't really know and didn't really talk to that entire night. Ask yourself, why was Higgins so insistent that John go to 34 Fairview that night? And then there's that sparring and fighting that he and Brian Albert were engaged in.
And I don't like this. I've been very critical of this. I think they need to drop this shit. The grab-assing is not like 2 guys acting like meathead. The idea that I don't buy that part at all. I've never bought the, they were practicing for getting, come on. It's not a fucking 5K. You don't need to warm up and stretch. Okay. That's not a thing. Nobody's going to be like, well, we're going to kick the shit out of him in 30 minutes. but we got to warm up first. Like, I think they need to drop that, completely drop the grab-assing was evidence that they were getting ready. I think they need to just abandon ship on that one, because if I'm not buying that, then good luck getting a jury to buy it. I'm just saying that.
Of all the things they could be doing, this is what they were doing just minutes before John O'Keefe walked into that house at 34 Fairview. We know that once John actually did walk in the door, it's about 2 steps, 4 feet or so, 2 steps for an adult male to reach that basement door. Remember, everybody was gathered in the kitchen. That's what Nicole Albert said. And every single witness agreed that at some point, Brian Higgins and Brian Albert left the group and went to another room. Where did they go? Where did they go together? Another important point.
Again, this all unnecessary. Just put John in the house. Doesn't Brian Albert, he's like trying to tell the jury that like Brian Albert and Brian Higgins went downstairs, and that's where they were lying in wait. And then John went in there and he went downstairs, and that's exactly where they got him. You don't have to prove this. You don't have to prove any of this. Just put John in the house. That's it. Put him in the goddamn house and it's over. Karen Reed's innocent. There's reasonable doubt that Karen Reed did not do this. Done. Period.
Was not upstairs. Brian Albert slipped in one of his testimony that he provided. Quote, I was watching Chloe downstairs, monitoring her because of the other people in the house. She's not good with strangers. Remember that testimony. So what happened next? We absolutely know that John was in the house. The data, Ryan, Heather, they all established that. We know that John ascended or descended stairs. We know that Brian Higgins and Brian Albert excused themselves. How long does it take to have a crossword? How long does it take to have a fight? How long would it take for Brian Higgins to say to John, you know, your girl's been texting me. A push, a punch, a fall, pull Chloe off his arm, and now it's done. What is that? 5 seconds? 10? Doesn't take long at all. And then the panic sets in.
So, okay. Yes, that could have happened. That's what you need to say to the jury. I think that the way he's explaining this to the jury is like, this is what happened. You remind them, you got to hold their hands through this. Okay. We're not saying this is what happened, but it could have happened. Okay. It could have happened. And if it could have happened, that is reasonable doubt. It could. I'm not saying that this is exactly how it happened. I'm not saying that he walked in the house and this happened and this is what happened. But I am saying that he went in the house, and he went in that house, and there were people in there that were drinking. We know that the jury didn't like drinking. These people had been drinking all day, right? A couple of them had reasons not to like John. Okay. We're not trying to convince you that these people are diabolical murderers. We're not here to do that. Quite frankly, that seems a bit far-fetched that you would invite a police officer into a police officer's house, murder them inside, and throw them on the front lawn. We are suggesting that it's well within the realm of possibilities that that John was in the house and that some sort of physical altercation happened and it went wrong. And if you were in a situation like that and something horrible happened and you panicked, it is well with what would you do with that body? Most of us would do the honest thing. But what if they decided that they didn't want to go to jail and they decided to put him outside and stick to the story that he never came in the house? That's it. You don't have to explain what happened. You know, you don't have to do all that. Just saying.
It wasn't intended to go that far, but what's done is done. And then some very, very odd things start happening at the Albert household. Very odd indeed. What do we know? We know through the testimony in key swipes that Brian Higgins very oddly goes directly to Canton Police Department. Why would he do that? After a night of drinking and partying, why go to CPD when you're drunk? What was so important there? He couldn't even get his own story straight. First, he said it was administrative work. Then he said he was moving cars. Then he said it was a factor of both. Is it both?
He said that the moving cars was the administrative work.
Both? Was it neither? Or was he there to gather intel? Ask yourself, why go? But the odd things keep piling up, and here's another. Chloe was the Albert family pet. Not only did she appear to be gone from the house that morning on January 29th, nobody saw her there. Even Jen McCabe admitted, I didn't see her there. But they actually got rid of the dog altogether. Within months of this incident, the dog was gone, out of the house, rehomed, never to be seen again. This was a dog they had had for 7 years. Also a dog who had a bite history. Why was it so important to get rid of that dog? Was there something about the dog they did not want law enforcement?
Okay, pivot. Instead of going there with the dog, you say to the jury, how many of you own dogs? I've owned a dog. The dog is part of your family. People don't get rid of family dogs. You dog owners know it. Maybe they should ask the jurors that at the voir dire. Do you own a dog? Get as many dog owners as you can on that jury. Because dog owners know that you don't rehome dogs after 7 years. It's not a thing. Nobody does that. Nobody does that. The dog was rehomed. The family dog was rehomed after 7 years. What? No dog owner is going to believe that. But again, this jury didn't look like a big dog owning family jury. This looked like a Siamese cat jury, or a fish jury, not a dog jury. Regular people own dogs. These were not regular people on this jury. I'm just saying, but drive that home to them. Like, Dad, do you think it's normal to get rid of your family dog? Because I don't. The dog is part of my family. We love our dog. If your dog bites someone, people have dogs that bite people all the time, and the town tries to put them down, and then they fight for their dog's life. You don't just give it away. That's not a thing normal people do, period. And does it prove that they were involved and that they are the ones who murdered John O'Keefe? No. But it's possible. And it's suspicious. And that is reasonable doubt right there. Again, hammer reasonable doubt.
To find out. Recall what Dr. Russell said. She's seen up to 1,000 animal attacks. In her expert opinion, John's right arm, those injuries are from an animal, quote, most likely a large dog.
And this is where Hanky fucked up, by the way. He challenged Dr. Russell, and now she's pissed. And Dr. Russell 2.0 is going to be a much more convincing witness than Dr. Russell 1.0, because you've insulted her, and now she knows this case better than anyone, and she knows all about the dog bite thing, etc. Okay? And she's been challenged, and she's polished, and I just think they fucked up with the Dr. Russell thing. She's going to be so much stronger.
And Dr. Russell's testimony, I'll remind you, was undisputed by any witness for the Commonwealth. But there are more odd and unexplained things. After a night of drinking and hanging out and partying, after being together for the entire day, at 2:22 a.m., Brian Albert decides to call Brian Higgins. That call was missed. 17 seconds later, Higgins calls Brian back, and they speak for 22 seconds. Now, that call is odd and suspicious enough, and just in and of itself, the fact that the call was made. But what's even more incriminating is that both men, both of them, lied about the calls happening. They both claim astonishingly that those calls are, you probably say it with me, they're butt dials.
Again, this would be great testimony and a great soliloquy to have if Alan Jackson was the prosecuting attorney in Brian Higgins' murder case or Brian Albert's murder case. That would be a really good line of attack. But you don't have to get in there. You don't have to get into the substance of the call. The important part is that they testified at the grand jury that they were sleeping. And now they're testifying suddenly after being they were caught lying. They're liars. They told the grand jury that they were sleeping, and then they got confronted with lies and they changed their story. Do they seem like honest people to you? Does that prove that they murdered him? No. But it does prove that they're dishonest. And these are the people that are telling you that John didn't go in the house. They're dishonest people. And if you think that they are dishonest people, That is reasonable doubt. Period. Go.
Amazing. But Albert and Higgins take it a step further. Not only did they claim that they were making calls as butt dials, but they were answering calls as butt dials.
While they were fucking.
And Higgins seemed awfully defensive about that call. Didn't you? Remember on cross-examination when I was asking, can you have a conversation in 22 seconds? He unequivocally said, no, that's impossible. It's not reasonable. You can't do it. Well, let's test that out. Hey, did you make it over to Canton? Yep. Haven't been any calls. Nobody knows a thing. All right, don't talk to anybody until we talk again.
So again, this is what I mean about the specifics. Now you're telling, I like this, but how this went over with the jury is they viewed this as Alan Jackson's telling them that you have to believe that this is exactly what happened. And if you don't believe that this is what happened, then Kearney probably did it. You don't even need to go there. They're liars. They're dishonest. They're the witnesses against my client. They're the witnesses telling you that John didn't come inside the house. They're dishonest, period.
Okay, fine. And by the way, come back over. I need help moving something heavy.
You don't need to say
How long
that.
did that take?
You know, I love it.
15
I love the
seconds,
theatrics,
maybe?
but you don't need to say it.
But the odd behavior isn't done yet. 5 minutes after that call that we just talked about, Jennifer.
And I do like that. He's right there. He's right there. He's staring at you. They brought him for a reason. Because he's looking at you right now. He's looking at your faces. You know, why is he here? There's only 10 seats in this courtroom, and he's occupying one of them, and he's staring at you. Like, bring that up. You know what I mean? I get that he didn't know Brian Albert was going to be there, but I would bring it up. I think he should have brought that up.
Kate is on her phone at her house, Google searching how long it takes for someone to die in the cold. That was at 2:27 a.m. That timeline seems to fit, doesn't it? And it fits a very telling and a very clear story. That search became a focal point of the Commonwealth's entire case. This case was starting to look a lot more like the defense of Jennifer McCabe than anything else. That's probably because there is no innocent explanation for that Google search at 2:27 a.m. None. At the end of the day, clearing away all the confusion, the Commonwealth's experts were left with two things that are true. First, neither of their experts could absolutely rule out that Jennifer McCabe made that search at 2:27 a.m. Neither. And second, the only person to use the actual phone model, the actual data, and the actual precise operating system was Rick Green. And he was clear. That search was at or before 2:27 a.m. And then it was deleted. So what else was going on at or around this same time when all this suspicious activity was happening?
And again, they challenged Rick Green, and now he's going to be stronger. He's going to point out that 1 out of 4,500 is such a powerful thing. That they didn't have that at the first trial. Now they can bring it up at the second one. 1 out of 4,500. I've never deleted a Google search in my life. Have any of you guys ever deleted a Google search? Would you even know how to do that? Well, Jennifer McCabe had never deleted one ever until 2:27. And that's when the data says that she deleted it. Now they'll tell you, their experts will tell you that she didn't do it. But guess what? At best, you're left unsure of whether or not she did that. And that is reasonable doubt. If you are unsure of whether or not Jennifer McCabe Googled how long to die in cold at 2:27, that means that it's possible she did. And if it's possible for Jennifer McCabe to Google how long to die in cold at 2:27, then it's possible that there was a conspiracy to cover up the murder of John O'Keefe and that Karen Read, therefore, is innocent. Period. Go.
At the Albert house and the McCabe house. 3 minutes after that search and 8 minutes after the Albert Higgins 2:22 a.m. call, Brian Loughran drives down the street in his snowplow. And he told you that there is no body laying on the lawn at 34 Fairview at 2:30 in the morning. Importantly, he didn't just simply say he didn't see a body, he wasn't paying attention. He said there was no body there. He knows the property, he knows the owners, he's grown up with these folks, he passes by all the time, not once, not twice, 3 passes. There was nobody on that lawn, period, at 2:30 a.m.
Point out here. Point of order. Very good stuff. Okay. We heard from him that the 𝗺𝗃𝗧𝗧 thing was like the worst witness. Okay. You know, and I don't know how to, I think that's fucking crazy that they thought 𝗺𝗃𝗧𝗧 was a person, but I think that he could also throw in there, you've been there. They took you there. Coming from the south, they will tell you that a tree line was there that would prevent you from seeing that. Okay. But what about coming from the north? You guys have been to Fairview Road. That lawn was wide open. And if you're coming from the north, then you are closer to the lawn. And that's the direction that Brian Loughran was coming from. That's also the direction that Tristan Morris, that Matthew McCabe, and that Brian Higgins were coming from. And none of the 7 passengers in those vehicles saw him on that lawn. Now ask yourself, does white snow eliminate things and make it harder to find, or illuminate things and make it easier to find? We don't have an expert to tell you that bodies are easier to see with 1 inch of snow. We didn't get an expert because you are New Englanders. You've lived in New England your entire life. You see snow every year. And you know, as New Englanders, that white snow brightens the whole outside, doesn't it? Doesn't it? It's darker on summer nights than it is on winter nights. Why is that? Because of snow. You're a New England jury. You know that. And you know that on that night, John O'Keefe's body of all nights would have stood out like a sore thumb on nights that it wouldn't in July. Period. Hammer that home. Go. Next.
And what other suspicious thing happened that night? By 3:30 a.m., someone moved a Ford Edge in front of the very area that would obstruct the view of where John's body would ultimately be discovered. Who's the only person in this case that you've heard about with Ford Edge? Brian Albert. Remember, as you're thinking about this, the base.
Colin Albert too. But again, I don't even want to go there. The Ford Edge. The key thing about the Ford Edge that you got to mention is we have a witness that was not interviewed by police for 1.5 years. If you were covering up, if police were trying, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, it's not what they did do, it's what they didn't do. It's really easy to cover up a murder if you don't do certain things. Okay. It's harder to do it if you are doing certain things. The planting of the taillight is the only thing we allege was going out of their way to actually create evidence. Most of it was just not looking for the evidence. Okay. If you don't look for the evidence, then you're not going to find it, are you? Right. And the first person that they should have spoken with, logic tells you, you guys aren't detectives. You're just regular people. But you know, and I know, the common sense dictates that one of the first people that you're going to want to speak with is the plow driver, because it's snowing. And did the plow driver see anything? Why, yes, he did. We had to find the plow driver. Our private investigator had to find the plow driver. Some unnamed third party we're not allowed to tell you about also found the plow driver, and something called Turtle Boy found the plow driver. All of them found this key witness before the state police investigators did. All of them. And when they finally spoke to them 1.5 years later, he told them that he saw no body on the lawn at 2:30 a.m., that had a body been there, he would have seen it. Your common sense tells you that he would have seen it. He's on something called Frankentruck with bright lights. He tells you that he's scanning the road looking for animals because God forbid an animal runs out. He's constantly looking on lawns. You've seen Brian Albert's house. You know that there would have been a body there. You know that 𝗺𝗃𝗧𝗧 would have seen that. And you know that 𝗺𝗃𝗧𝗧 said that he saw a Ford Edge parked in the exact spot at 3 a.m. where John's body would be found 3 hours later at 6 a.m. So there's no body, and then a Ford Edge is seen, and then there's a body. Okay. You don't have to be trained in detective work to know that the police would want to find out who was driving that Ford Edge, but they didn't. They didn't speak to, not talking to 𝗺𝗂𝗧𝗧 𝗺𝗂𝗧 was not a mistake. It was intentional. They didn't talk to 𝗺𝗂𝗧𝗧 𝗺𝗂𝗧 because they didn't want him to say what he was going to say. They didn't want to do that. They didn't want to investigate anyone but Karen Read. They didn't want to figure out who was driving a Ford Edge. And guess what? Let's talk about that Ford Edge. It doesn't matter what make and model of that car is. The Commonwealth is going to try to tell you that he got the make and model of that car wrong, but it doesn't matter. Adam Lally asked if he knew the difference between a Jeep Grand Cherokee and a Ford Edge. Well, that's a good question. Let's suppose it was a Jeep Grand Cherokee that was seen there. It's still a car parked next to where they claim a dead body was found 3 hours later. And they didn't look for the driver of that car. And they claimed that John O'Keefe was killed by a motor vehicle collision, which means they didn't investigate all possibilities, which means there's reasonable doubt, which means there's somebody else that could have killed John O'Keefe besides Karen Read. And the idea that someone besides Karen Read could have done this is in and of itself reasonable doubt. Boom. Next.
Basement at 34 Fairview is serviced by a bulkhead. It's a quick and convenient door to the backyard. And that backyard is serviced by a side fence. And that side fence is easily accessible to the front yard at the side of the house. Which side of the house? The side where John's body was found. And by 6 a.m., John's body was, in fact, now outside. While this flurry of suspicious activity was going on with the Alberts and the McCabe's, what's happening with Karen? All she knows at this point, think about it, at approximately 2:21, she dropped off John. He walked into 34 Fairview, and that's all she knows. She knows nothing else that was going on. So what was she left to think? He goes in to check the party out, but all of a sudden he's not coming back. He's not responding. Minutes start to pass. 1 minute turns to 2, 2 turn to 10. Where is he? Why isn't he responding? She's sitting in the cold, dark, freezing outside in the car. Naturally, she's perturbed. Being perturbed turns into being peeved. Being peeved eventually turns into being pissed. By 12:30, Karen's mad. She's left 34 Fairview to make a point, but she's still texting and calling. What could she reasonably be thinking at this point? What's going through her mind? 12:33 turns into 12:34. I can't believe he'd do this to me. 12:34 turns into 12:35. Where is he? Why aren't you answering, John? 12:35 turns to 12:36. Jesus Christ. I'm calling and you're not answering. Where are you? Pick up the phone. But there's still no answer. There's still no response. By 12:37, she's getting furious. She does not know that something has happened to John. She does not know that. So she leaves the first angry voicemail.
I think that for the sake of time, again, every minute is valuable here. We don't need the whole minute by minute thing with 12:33 said this, 12:34 this is what she's experiencing. I think you just need to point out that there's nothing suspicious about, they're going to tell you, the Commonwealth is going to tell you that there's something suspicious about Karen Read calling John 50 times. There's actually, it's quite the opposite. Karen Read calling John 50 times is evidence that she thought he was alive. And if she thought that he was alive, that means that she didn't hit him. Period. And guilty people, murderers, don't leave voicemails screaming at the person that they just killed. I assure you, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've never seen a murderer leave a voicemail like that after murdering them. I've seen the opposite, but I've never seen that. This is not a manipulative person. This is a genuine person who had no idea where her boyfriend was, who was getting mad at him because he wasn't answering her and wasn't coming home, and she didn't know what to do. That worry, it started off as anger, and then it turned to fear later on when she realized something had gone wrong.
Illustrates frustration, aggravation, all the normal responses anybody might have, you and I might have. But little did she know. The next open voicemail has Karen parking at John's garage after she gets home. You can hear her heels clicking across the garage floor. For all she knows at this point, John's just drunk, he's been partying, he's hanging out, just forgot about her, blowing her off. But John's still not responding, and as the minutes tick by, Karen becomes increasingly upset. Those are the voicemails that you heard. How could he do this? Why is he ignoring me? Why is he ignoring the kids? Those are the thoughts bearing down on Karen Read as she sat in an empty house late at night by herself. Ladies and gentlemen, she did not know what had happened to John. But within the next voicemail, you quickly learn what she was thinking and what she was feeling. Now it's 5:23 a.m. She's woken up. She's realized that he hasn't come home and he hasn't responded to a single text, not a single call. And anger quickly turns to panic and abject fear. She's so distraught. She reaches out to him again. John, where the fuck are you? She says through tears and desperation. And at 6:03, the question was answered, and her worst fears are realized when she finds his body laying, dying in the cold in Brian Albert's front yard. You heard her. You can feel the grief. You can feel the raw anguish. You can see it. You don't have to wonder the emotional journey that Karen traveled that night. You can see it in the video. You can hear it in the audio. From the time he left her and walked into 34 Fairview and she called, she reached out 53 times. She called him 53 times before finding his body. Think about that. The Commonwealth wants you to believe that she murdered this man. And then after that murder, she called him not once, not twice, 53 times. It makes no sense. What does make sense is that she emotionally moved from anger, then to panic, then to grief. So back at 5:07, when she began her search looking for John, she backed out of the garage, and what would happen next would change the entire course of this case.
Again, you could say, reiterate that it is reasonable to believe that this is how she was feeling. That if you think that is a reasonable possible explanation for her behavior, then you have reasonable doubt about the Commonwealth's story. Your doubt is, it's reasonable to believe that this could happen, period.
Case. As she backed out of that garage, she hit John's Traverse and cracked her right rear taillight. Folks, the Commonwealth has one job to do in this courtroom. It's an immutable responsibility to provide you with the truth. That's it. Not to win the case, but to seek justice and to do it through the truth. Ask yourself, did you get that truth from the Commonwealth? The Commonwealth continually tried to tell you that that video showed that the SUV came close to John's Traverse, and it took us showing you the video to unequivocally establish that Karen hit that car and cracked her taillight at 5:07. You can almost hear an audible gasp in the courtroom when we finally showed you the actual video. You can see that tire move. I'm only going to show you one series of exhibits during my entire closing, but it's that important. And it's this. Look at the condition of her taillight when she pulls out of the driveway at 5:07. That taillight, and I'm going to choose my words very carefully here.
Yeah, this is good.
That taillight is cracked, but it's not completely damaged. And if there was any question in your mind about the level of damage to that taillight at 5:07, all doubt was extinguished. When Dighton Police Officer Barrows walked into this courtroom, he's a sworn officer. He's not associated with Kenton. He's not associated with the Alberts. He's not associated with the McCabe's. He doesn't know Michael Proctor. In other words, he doesn't answer to any of these folks. He's an outsider and he's completely independent. And his words were the following, quote, "That taillight was not completely damaged. It was cracked. A piece was missing, but not completely damaged." Take a look at this photograph and tell me.
This is good.
Which one looks like
this is
Barrows'
good. This is really good stuff.
Or the one on the right. The reconstructed light on the left is what that light looked like before it was in Trooper Proctor's possession. Remember that. That's what it looked like before Trooper Proctor had access to the SUV. And you have an independent police officer telling you so.
Well, that's your theory of what it looked like. You know, I think that you could point out this, the taillight on the left matches what you saw at 5:07 at Meadows. You can see that because, and again, show the picture of Meadows. You see on that bottom right-hand corner, you see this part. You can zoom, you can be like, you see this part right here, that, and that, and that over here. If the taillight was gone from that, as the Commonwealth claims, none of this would be illuminated red. It would be blank like this part right here. The blank part is the part that should have been that the taillight's cracked. And they will tell you that this is untrue because they didn't find any taillight at 1 Meadows Ave. Why would they? If you were to crack your taillight, it's a big housing unit. The small pieces, the small fragments of taillight would collapse into the taillight itself. They wouldn't explode. We don't have a physics expert that explains this because you guys have common sense. You're an educated group of people. We selected you because of that, because you know that this taillight doesn't look like that. You're smart people.
But we can tell you so. You'll recall that after John's body was discovered, lank, very good friend of the Alberts, walked into Brian Albert's house and had an off-the-record meeting with him. No one's ever going to know exactly what that meeting was about, what they discussed, because that interview, like everything else in this case, it wasn't recorded. It wasn't memorialized. But we do know that shortly thereafter, the Canton Police Department was recused from the matter entirely. And the case was assigned to one Michael Proctor. You have to believe that when the Alberts found that out, they thought they hit the lottery. They thought they hit the lottery. What are the chances? The department where my brother works, that would have been great to investigate this case, but that department's been recused. That's tough luck. But the guy who catches the case is Michael Proctor, a guy we go back with for decades.
I agree completely that they thought they hit the lottery when that happened. But again, you don't have to prove the McAlberts did this. You don't have to prove that the McAlberts thought that they hit the lottery when this happened. You just have to point out that it is completely inappropriate for a close family friend of the McAlberts to be assigned to this case. That if Michael Proctor was an ethical investigator, he would have immediately notified his supervisors and gotten himself off of this case because he's too close to it. Period. You don't need to throw in the part about the McAlberts were all excited that he got, in this. You just have to point out this is not standard procedure. This is a conflict of interest. There were other detectives that the case could have been handed off to, but instead you got Michael Proctor, the same Michael Proctor who put all those disgusting text messages out, the same Michael Proctor who said pin it on the girl, the same Michael Proctor who said that the homeowner won't get any shit, the same Michael Proctor who was offered a gift from the Albert family on the day that Karen Reed was arrested. That Michael Proctor. So you don't have to believe, we don't have to prove that Michael Proctor orchestrated some elaborate cover up here. We just have to prove to you that it's possible. It's possible that he did. And if you think that it's possible, that's reasonable doubt. Period. Go.
At such a break, they probably thought, when this is over, we need to get that dude a gift. Oh, wait a minute. They didn't think that. They said it.
Because we're like 30 minutes into the speech. We're halfway in. I haven't heard reasonable doubt yet. Have you guys heard reasonable doubt yet?
Loud. But still, you've got to imagine that the Alberts had to be stressed with that whole thing about a dead body being on their lawn. That might get some attention. And they had to be wondering, will he set up a crime scene? Is he going to come into the house? Is he going to search the house? Is he going to send in a forensics team? Is he going to interview witnesses? Is he going to take us to the station? Will he take our phones? Will he look at our communications? Will he look at our Google searches? Will he look at our early morning phone calls? Is he going to look in the basement? And Michael Proctor answered every single one of those questions resoundingly. Nope. He's a Boston cop too.
Because we don't know that any of those conversations that he just described took place. You have no proof of that. You didn't offer any evidence to the court to that. I believe all those conversations took place. But again, you don't need to prove those conversations took place. You just need to point out that it is irregular to have someone as close to the McAlberts be assigned the lead investigator, period.
And with that, Michael Proctor didn't draw a thin blue line. He erected a tall blue wall. A wall that you can't scale. A wall that Karen Reed certainly couldn't get over. A wall between us and them. A place you folks are not invited. We protect our own. It's us or it's them. And by the way, who's she after all? Nobody. An outsider. This is going to be easy. Or so they thought. Let's look at what Michael Proctor actually did and did not do in this case. One of the consistent issues that's come up throughout this trial is how evidence always seems to be changing and evolving when in Michael Proctor's hands or somebody in his orbit. If it happens once, let's chalk it up to a mistake. Twice, it's starting to look a little bit like incompetence. If that happens every single time, it becomes intentional, which means it becomes corruption. The defense spent some time, we spent some time discussing the toe time that Michael Proctor swore to in affidavits. There was a reason that we believed it was so important, and I want to talk about that for just a quick second. Because this was a concerted effort by Michael Proctor to falsify the time the car was seized, so that no one would know that he actually had possession of the car before the first pieces of taillight were ever discovered at the scene. But he got caught. And when he did, the best he could come up with was it was a typo. Like a dozen times, a typo. You'll remember what that testimony was. The truth is that car was in Michael Proctor's possession from about 4:12 in the afternoon. He said it was 4:16 when he finally had to tell the truth or some version of the truth. Those first pieces of taillight were not found until after 5:45 p.m. That is the very fact that Michael Proctor was trying to hide by those falsified affidavits, saying he didn't seize the car until 5:30. But that wasn't Michael Proctor's only manipulation of the investigation. What about Brian Lockridge? You met him. Michael Proctor did his level best to not just hide evidence, but to hide human beings from you and from us. Michael Proctor was informed that the plow drivers were out that night. There would
yes, Steph. He's doing a good job pointing out the doubt. He's just not saying that it's the reasonable doubt. That's a great way of putting this. Just again, we all know it's reasonable doubt, but these people are retarded and you have to walk them through it. So now the assumption going into trial 2 is just assume you're talking to retarded people, just really stupid people who need to be walked through this because your client's freedom depends on that. You shouldn't have to do that, but you do. So you play to win the game, don't you? You know, like sometimes, yeah, you have Tom Brady, and you should be able to pass all over him. But guess what? Their rush defense is weak. So maybe just run the ball, you know, maybe just do the tush push. Maybe do that. Anyway, so he gets about a good point. He brings up here a good point about how Michael Trotta, when he was allegedly told Michael Proctor that no one plowed the road, but Michael Trotta testified that that was a lie. Why is he lying? Why would he make up a lie in the report about what Michael Trotta said? You met Michael Trotta. He's a nice guy. He runs the DPW. Why would he lie to who do you think is being dishonest here? Michael Proctor or Michael Trotta? We don't have any text messages from Michael Trotta saying horrible things, but we do for Michael Proctor. So you decide.
Be a witness, potentially along 34 Fairview at the exact times in question. Even Michael Trotta expressly told Michael Proctor that 34 Fairview had in fact been plowed that morning, and by whom. Proctor not only did not interview Brian Loughran, he never disclosed his name in a single report. He hid it. This is a witness who was literally on 34 Fairview at the time in question where a body was found on the lawn. Wouldn't you want to get the truth from an eyewitness? Wouldn't you want to seek that out? Not if you're Michael Proctor, a close friend of the Owls. If it were up to Proctor, you literally never would have heard of or from Brian Loughran. That's a scary prospect. I want to touch briefly on the additional physical evidence or some additional physical evidence presented by the Commonwealth in this case. You'll recall Christina Hanley. She established to a scientific certainty that the glass on the bumper, which was told to you in opening statement, was going to have something to do with this case. The glass on the bumper was going to match that cocktail glass. She told you unequivocally the glass on the bumper did not match the cocktail glass. They came from two different sources. The glass on the bumper has nothing to do with the cocktail glass. So that glass on the bumper had to get there somehow. It didn't get there by being broken from the cocktail glass. See the point? It had to get on the bumper somehow. It didn't jump up there by itself. And what's really interesting is that there was one piece on the bumper, only one, that matched something else in the case. It was a perfect match to a piece of glass that was supposedly found at the scene. Who do you think had possession of that matching glass? Michael Proctor. So the glass on the bumper had to be placed there. And the only person who had anything close to matching the pieces that had to be placed there is Michael Proctor. You do the math. That leads us to the magic hair. The Commonwealth spent a lot of time bringing in experts about mitochondrial DNA and maternal DNA lines and comparative analyses, and all that sounds really great and really sciencey, except for the fact that it just doesn't matter. Why? Because you would have to believe that that little hair, tiny, tiny little hair, barely perched on the side of that SUV through survived nearly 75 miles of a raging blizzard outside. That would be a magic hair indeed. That magic hair means nothing. The DNA means nothing, and that's because the hair was from somewhere else. It certainly was not from a motor vehicle incident at 34 Fairview on January 29th. That hair was placed there.
Again, that hair was placed there. Better frame that to the jury. You don't have to believe that hair was placed there. You just have to believe that it's possible. It's possible. It's possible that, and we would argue more likely, due to the fact that it seems unreasonable to believe that that hair would remain on the car throughout this entire journey in this blizzard. Right. So we don't have to prove to you that that hair was placed there. But it's reasonable to believe that it could have. And if it was placed there, that means that Karen Reed was framed, period.
The DNA on the outside of the taillight housing also merits very little discussion. John's DNA would be expected to be found all over that SUV, inside, outside, the exterior, the interior, everything he touched would have had his DNA on it. Here's what's actually important about that DNA. No DNA was found on the interior of that taillight. The taillight that they now claim crashed into his arm and shattered. No blood was found anywhere on that taillight or any taillight pieces. And no tissue was found anywhere on that taillight or any taillight pieces. But we're to believe that that taillight literally exploded on John's arm at 25 miles an hour with 1,000 pounds of pressure. We talked about the evidence.
We're like, and they want you to believe that polycarbonate taillight turned into a dagger and that no blood was left on it. Ask yourself this: if a knife was used to cut someone up, wouldn't the knife have blood on it? But none of the 45 pieces of taillight that they found over the course of the next 3 weeks had any remnants of blood, and blood does not disappear. Blood is forever. People who clean their houses up and down after a murder always leave behind a little bit of blood. You can't get rid of blood. And either way, Karen Reed didn't try to get rid of blood because they're saying that she just left the pieces of taillight there, but none of them had any blood on it. Again, we don't have to prove that they planned it. All we have to do is say, yeah, maybe that didn't happen. Maybe that didn't happen. And that's not a hard sell to believe that that possibly didn't happen. It's a hard sell to believe it did happen. Boom, go.
Very funny things when in Proctor's possession or the possession of somebody in his orbit. Now think about the videos that we saw. How many videos appear to be somehow manipulated or altered? Just about every single one of them. Look at the video of the Sally Port. Let's take that one, for example, that grainy one. It's missing the exact time that would show the condition of the taillight when it was pulled in to the Sally Port. Pretty important time, wouldn't you think? Did someone not want you to see what the condition of the taillight was at that exact time? But the good news is there's a second video. It's much clearer. And it's from the same time frame. We didn't get that one for about 2.5 years into the investigation. Literally, it was after the trial started that that one was turned over. And this is important. The Commonwealth introduced you to a person by the name of 𝗫𝗓𝗄 𝗫𝗂𝗍𝗂. They presented video showing what was clearly the right side of the car. They asked questions about the right side of the car. You'll recall, Mr. Lally asked Sergeant Buchanan, did you or Trooper Proctor ever go at, or near the right side of that taillight? And while he was asking the question, what appeared to be the right side of the car was looking at you. The video was still up. Buchanan paused, turned earnestly into the microphone, stared at you and said, never. We never went anywhere around that taillight. While he was showing you the right side of the car. And that trick might have worked until we got up to cross-examine him. And only then, on the second day of his testimony, did he have to admit that the video was actually inverted. It was backward. And it was cleverly inverted at that. The timestamp had the proper orientation, which means that timestamp had to be removed, the video inverted, and the timestamp placed back on it, which means that was done intentionally. That was not a mistake. And when caught in that obvious fabrication, Buchanan doubled down and said, it's exactly the same. You remember that back and forth. It's exactly the same, he said, as if we're stupid. Is it exactly the same? Or is it exactly up?
As if we're stupid. As if you're stupid. He's insulting you. He wants you to believe that. He thinks you're stupid. He thinks you're going to buy that up. And he thinks you're going to believe that because he is a police officer and you have been trained your entire life to believe people like him, to believe that people like him are incapable of lying. But ask yourself this: if he's such an honest person, why would he introduce inverted video into evidence in the first place? Does that seem like something that honest people would do? We don't have to prove to you that they intentionally put inverted video into this in order to deceive you. You just have to think that it's possible that they did. And if you think it's possible that they did, then that is reasonable doubt. Honest people don't introduce inverted video into murder trials. These are not honest people. And if you believe them to be dishonest in general, then you cannot trust a single word that they said during their testimony. And these are the people telling you that Karen Reed is guilty of murder. And it is very reasonable to doubt them. Boom, go.
Opposite. Ladies and gentlemen, you were lied to. There's no other way to say it. It's inexcusable. It's abhorrent. But it's also a paradigm of everything that the investigators have been willing to do in this case. Lie, obfuscate, manipulate, alter. And when they're caught, they just excuse it away. Doesn't matter. It's the same thing. What's the big deal? Just look the other way. And don't forget, Buchanan is Proctor's supervisor. And he was in that little group chat where Karen Reed's naked photos were being searched for. You know the saying about the apple falling from the tree. Ladies and gentlemen, we haven't even started talking about the taillight yet. You'll recall that at the very beginning of this case, you were introduced to no fewer than 5 CPD officers very early on who searched the scene. None of them, not a single one, found any taillight material at the scene. Zero.
So important.
Stephen Seraph, Sean Good, Stephen Mulaney, Michael Lank, Paul Gallagher, they were all there. They were all walking right around there. They were all looking. They were searching with their eyes. They were searching with their hands. Some said they were searching with their feet. They even used tools, a leaf blower. Not one piece of bright red taillight material was at the scene, not a single piece, but incredibly, over the course of the next 3 weeks, according to Michael Proctor, 47 pieces of taillight material would end up being found.
Stop right there. Stop right there. Very important that he's pointing this out. The Commonwealth's case is taillight. The taillight is the only physical evidence linking Karen Read to this. Well, the Canton Police Department searched that area. They didn't find a single piece of red taillight there. But don't take our word for it, and don't take their word for it. They showed you, Lieutenant Gallagher showed you a video of him searching for the taillight. You saw his video. You saw this small area that he searched. You've been to that lawn. That was the area where the state police claimed that they found this evidence. Of course, they didn't take any pictures of it there, but they will tell you that they found it there over the course of the next 3 weeks. Ask yourself, is it reasonable to doubt that? And if you think that story doesn't sound, but it's possible that story is inaccurate, then that is reasonable doubt in and of itself. You saw the video of Lieutenant Gallagher using his leaf blower. You actually saw Lieutenant Gallagher find and testify to you that he found transparent pieces of cocktail glass. You're all New Englanders here. You're fine New England men and women, all of you. You've all grown up here. Every year it snows, doesn't it? It's the worst. We hate it. We hate it when it snows like this. It's gross. It's annoying. It takes up space. We don't like it. But you know, and I know, that bright red taillight would stick out like a sore thumb, much more than a transparent piece of cocktail glass, because Lieutenant Gallagher found the cocktail glass because it's on video of him finding it's see-through. It's the easiest thing to hide, and he found it. But the red taillight, which is much harder to hide, and mind you, Trooper Proctor found the biggest piece, a piece this big. He showed it to you. He found that piece on February 18th, he said. He didn't document it all. He didn't take a picture of it, but he tells you it was there, which means that Lieutenant Gallagher missed it. Lieutenant Gallagher is an esteemed member of the Canton Police Department. He's been on the job 30 years. The dude makes more money than the president. That's how valuable he is to the town of Canton. And he filmed himself searching the area, and he didn't see that 𝗵𝗂𝗃𝗃 motherfucker sitting on the lawn, standing out like a sore thumb in bright daylight. Ask yourself, is it reasonable to believe that taillight wasn't there at 7 a.m.? Is that reasonable? Because if you think it's reasonable that taillight wasn't there at 7 a.m., then there is reasonable doubt that you must vote to acquit Karen Read, because it's reasonable to believe that taillight was not there at 7 a.m. Boom. Next, go.
Some of which were the size of a salad plate. The CERT team shows up later on January 29th, and according to O'Hara, the first few pieces of taillight were found about 5:45. And here's some interesting testimony that you heard. Who else was there? Who did O'Hara say was there? Well, he said his team was there. He certainly expected that. Then he said there were others. These other mysterious figures, some from Canton PD, some from the Massachusetts State Police, that he could not account for. Heavy coats, big masks, hats. Even Lieutenant O'Hara could not tell who was who. But he did note Canton police officers were there who were unaccounted for. Massachusetts state troopers were there unaccounted for. And during that search that was overseen by Trooper 𝗃𝗍𝗄𝗃, Proctor's supervisor, 3 pieces of taillight material were found. That's super important. I want to concentrate on that for a second. O'Hara said all 3 pieces were in an area about 12 inches square. That's an area about as big as your dinner plate. 𝗃𝗍𝗄𝗃, however, claimed that one red piece was found about 3 feet away from that was a shoe About 1 to 2 feet from that was a clear piece of plastic, and a few feet away from that was a red piece of plastic. So
Total
red,
Esquire.
clear, and red.
Esquire.
Over the span of about, added up probably 10 or 12 feet. Ladies and gentlemen, both of those things cannot be true. Somebody is taking liberties with the facts. Then Lieutenant Tully comes to court and makes this big grand gesture of opening all these evidence bags. These 2 evidence bags in particular represent exactly what we're talking about. Those 3 pieces, red, clear, red. They're marked, they're sealed, they look official. They're not stop and shop bags, thank God. At least they've moved up from that. We've got evidence tape on them. Who knew? There's evidence tape around here. So this must be real evidence, right? It must be real evidence in this case. And after making that big theatrical display, he opens up the bag with the red pieces and he pulls 2 pieces out. That's okay. Put the 2 red pieces together. Good so far. Then he opens up the second bag under Mr. Lowley's questioning. And you remember he hesitated just a second. Opened that bag and pulled out 1 piece of clear plastic. Then pulled out a second piece of clear plastic with no explanation as to how that could have possibly happened. And he quickly returned all 4 of those back into the bag, sealed them up, and we're done for the day. The next day I asked about that evidence again. I asked him to open up that bag with the red pieces, and he did the same thing. Pulled out 2 red pieces of plastic. I said, you recall this, I said, look deeper, look closer, sir, pull everything out of that bag. Would he have had I not suggested it? And then he pulled a 3rd piece of red plastic out of the bag. So miraculously, Trooper Tully's 3 pieces of plastic became 5 pieces of plastic right before your eyes. Ladies and gentlemen, the forces at play that multiplied those pieces of plastic inside those evidence bags are the same forces at play that multiplied the pieces of plastic at 34 Fairview. Think about that. Let that sink in for a second.
Again, I'm being repetitive here, but everything he says needs to be framed and just reminded that this is reasonable doubt. That we are trying to convince you that our entire defense is that Karen Reed was framed by the police, right? That someone else killed him and that Karen Reed was framed by the police. And all of this information we're giving you is evidence or is reasonable doubt that the Commonwealth's theory that he was hit by a car might not be accurate. Because our theory, do we have proof that Brian Tully intentionally lied? No. But you saw Lieutenant Tully. He's a sharp person. Does he strike you as the kind of person that would make a mistake like that? If not, that's reasonable doubt. I haven't heard reasonable doubt yet. We're 45 minutes in.
How easy is it? That's not sloppiness. That's evidence manipulation. That's how over the course of 3 weeks, those pieces of plastic go from 0 to 3 to 5 to 47. Ever increasing in size with every single search. Now, knowing all that, ask yourself the looming question, who had access to that taillight, the cracked taillight? Who was it? Go back and watch the 𝗠𝗵𝗺 video. I'll give you the timestamp, 5:37, and see it for yourself. We know that Trooper Proctor, with binder in hand, walked by himself. Once we corrected the video from being inverted, you can see that he walked back by himself to the right rear taillight where nobody could see what he was doing. Higgins' own key swipes put him in the 𝗠𝗵𝗺 that same afternoon and evening. And then the 𝗠𝗵𝗺 video magically skips and Chief Berkowitz appears right next to Proctor at the back of that vehicle in the same spot, and they walk out of the 𝗠𝗵𝗺 together. Where were they going? Remember O'Hara, unidentified troopers and Canton cops were at the search at 34 Fairview. How hard is it to drop a piece of plastic? We spent a long time talking about the compromised and altered and tampered and manipulated evidence, but now I want to switch and talk a little bit about the true facts in this case, because you did hear some true evidence and true facts.
Again, do we know who planted taillight there? No. But it's possible, wasn't it? It's possible because we don't know who was on the CERT team. The Commonwealth notice didn't provide a witness who testified that they found that taillight. The big piece of evidence used to arraign and arrest Karen Reed, and they don't even know who found it. They can't tell you who found it because we don't know who was on that CERT team. It could have been anyone. And oh yeah, it just so happens that a member of the Albert family, Kevin Albert, who was not supposed to be involved in this investigation at all, was involved in the investigation, was bringing Katie McLaughlin in, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. Okay, go ahead. Reasonable doubt.
The Commonwealth presented about 67, maybe more witnesses and expended 30 plus days of trial and 9 weeks of your life. Maybe we're in the 10th week. For what? It should be relatively simple, right? The Commonwealth claims that Karen Reed pulled up to 34 Fairview. John got out of the car. She reversed into him.
And that's a good point, too, that they could bring up. You guys asked for that report, and they couldn't give it to you because they don't have one. And that's reasonable doubt that they don't even have a log of any of this. They don't have an explanation. You wanted answers, and you couldn't get it because they don't have it. You must acquit her, period.
And hit him, and then she drove home. That's 4 facts. Just 4 facts. That's all it is. what evidence do they actually have to prove that that SUV ever hit John? The answer is none. They don't have any. There's no evidence whatsoever.
This is
that Karen
great.
Reid's
This
vehicle
is good.
Ever struck John O'Keefe,
This-
or that Karen Reid ever
Yes.
wanted to strike John
Yes,
O'Keefe.
yes, yes,
In
yes,
fact, every
yes.
single piece of material evidence in
Preach.
this case unequivocally proves the opposite. John went into that house. That SUV was not damaged by hitting John, and John's injuries did not come from being hit by a car. That's what the evidence actually shows.
Yes.
The Commonwealth knows that, and they've known it for a long time, and Proctor knows that. And because of that, the Commonwealth just resorts to character assassination and talking for weeks on end about the snow. Let's talk about what the real evidence actually shows, the unassailable science. Let's talk about the truth.
Okay, here we go.
Concerning John's injuries first, the Commonwealth's own medical examiner, Dr. 𝗄𝗏 could not conclude that John was hit by a car. Think about that. And she would not even say that it was a homicide. She told you without any dispute in this case, quote, evidence pointing toward one manner of death is no more compelling than evidence of a competing manner of death, end quote. Her words, not mine.
Not mine.
She went on to say it's just as likely that he was punched and fell backward. His injuries are consistent with that. In fact, in her expert opinion, his injuries are consistent with a physical altercation, as she testified, but they are not, in her words, not classical injuries from an auto-pedestrian accident. That by itself is reasonable doubt.
There we go. Yes.
But the evidence and the truth goes
That's
far
it.
further.
Yes, he said
We
it.
introduced you to not one, but two thoroughly credentialed medical examiners or medical experts, Dr. Sheridan and Dr. Russell, both of whom said John
It's reasonable doubt because it could have happened. That's what we're saying here. We are not trying to specifically blame any specific person. We are telling you that someone else could have done this, and the medical examiner agrees with us. The Commonwealth's own witness agrees with us that someone else could have done this. And if you think there's any chance someone else could have done this, then that's reasonable doubt, and you must acquit. In this country, we do not put people in jail for the rest of their lives about if maybe they did it, unless we are so sure that they did it beyond a reasonable doubt. It's reasonable to believe that John could have died in another way. Period.
John's arm injury is consistent with an animal attack. Dr. Russell studied, diagnosed, and treated up to 1,000 animal wounds. She's an expert in animal wounds, and she was unequivocal. Those wounds are from an animal, likely a large dog, which means that John was attacked inside the home where Chloe was. There is no other possibility. And Dr. Sheridan, for his part, with thousands of 13,000 autopsies under his belt, decades of experience as the chief medical examiner who's triple credentialed in anatomical, forensic, and neuropathology, he told you that John's injuries are inconsistent with a motor vehicle accident or incident. They're consistent, however, with a physical altercation. In layman's terms, the science proves John was beaten.
Ask yourself this, Jerry. We provided two doctors with decades worth of experience, both of whom testified that the marks on John's arm came from a dog bite. The Commonwealth provided Trooper Paul, who graduated from community college, who told you that the marks on John's arm came from polycarbonate taillight. Now, I would argue that you should believe that our experts are more accurate than their alleged expert. But you don't even have to believe that. You just have to believe that it's possible that Dr. Marie Russell and Dr. Frank Sheridan are right. And because if you think it's possible that John was bitten by a dog, well, then he had to be in the house, because that's where the dog was. The dog that's disappeared was inside the house, period. The dog wasn't outside the house. There was no other explanation for that. So if you think it's even remotely possible that John was bitten by a dog, then that is reasonable doubt. So you don't have to believe that Dr. Sheridan and Dr. Russell are more qualified to talk about dog bites than Trooper Paul. You just have to think it's possible that they are. Period. Go.
That also is reasonable doubt and should end this case. But the facts and evidence don't stop there. Two of the most highly educated and highly qualified engineers you'll ever meet, Dr. Dan Wolf and Dr. Andrew Rentschler, mechanical engineer and a biomechanist. They reviewed this case. They did testing. They did analysis. They evaluated the case scientifically. They were not hired by the defense, not by the Commonwealth. They're completely 100% independent of any party in this case. And they were equally available, by the way.
Yes.
To the
Yes.
Commonwealth.
Yes.
They could have called them.
Yes. Ask yourself why they
They
didn't.
explained that John's injuries were not caused by being hit by Miss Reed's SUV, and that the SUV was not damaged by coming in contact with John O'Keefe's body.
Full stop.
That should end the inquiry right there.
That's
Both
it.
sides of the equation. From a physics, engineering, and biomechanical standpoint, they established that John O'Keefe was not struck by Karen Reed's vehicle, period. And that is yet another fact that establishes reasonable doubt
Yes.
in this case.
There it is. But explain why. That is another fact that establishes reasonable doubt, because if you have two experts telling you that John wasn't hit by a car, it's very reasonable to doubt that he was hit by a car, period. I would say it's overwhelming proof that John was not hit by a car. But guess what? We don't even have to prove that. Reasonable doubt just thinks that maybe he wasn't hit by a car. And if you think that maybe he wasn't hit by a car, then you must acquit Karen Reed, because they have not proven that he was, period. Go.
So instead of calling the ARCA experts, which they had available to them, the Commonwealth chose to introduce you to Trooper Joe Paul. You'll remember his testimony. I think I'm being kind when I say that Trooper Paul's analysis lacked credibility. Trooper Paul lacks the experience, the education, the training, the background, and the knowledge to not only render opinions on these issues, but to even understand the issues themselves. He makes the absurd claim that John was hit on the elbow area of his arm by a taillight. He was spun to the left in a pirouette. His arm stayed on the light long enough for the shards of plastic to explode around him, scratching his arm, even though he was wearing long sleeves, then projecting him 30 feet to the left, but not before making a stop to hit his head on either the curb or the pavement, before coming to his final resting place with his unbroken phone tucked neatly under his body.
So is it reasonable to doubt? Now, we think that story is absolutely absurd and is a complete fairy tale. And I think you would too, but you don't even have to believe that's untrue. You just think that you have to believe it's possible that it's untrue, period. And if you think it's possible that this fantastical situation, that the laws of physics suddenly stopped existing exclusively on Brian Albert's front lawn one night in January, then that's reasonable doubt. If you think it's possible, because they are trying to tell you that the laws of physics ceased to exist in the town of Canton on that night. Isaac Newton would be rolling in his grave right now hearing that. Go.
It's nonsensical. It borders on laughable.
Oh, and by the way, and also like during one more thing, during the ARCA guys cross-examination, they need to ask them now that they know. Again, this is what we can learn from the jury. The jury thinks that maybe these guys were hired by insurance companies. Now you can ask them that. Were you hired? Do you work for a car insurance company? Is there any, do you represent an organization that would financially benefit from Karen Reed not hitting John O'Keefe with the car? No. Okay, cool. Like, just throw that all out there. You can't say FBI, but knock some other ones off the list. Now that we know that, they might throw that out there.
Compare that testimony to Dr. Dan Wolf and Dr.
Yes,
Andrew Renshaw.
that is a
Both
My Cousin
PhDs in
Vinny
engineering,
quote.
Both
Yes.
top of their field in accident reconstruction, both published peer-reviewed articles on the issues. Both men are highly sought after by the likes of national sports leagues and the United States Department of Defense, and these men are unrivaled in accident reconstruction. What did Dr. Renshaw say before he left the stand? This was even under cross-examination. He said that the physics and the science don't lie. His words were, "You can't deny the science and the physics." John wasn't hit by that car, period. The Commonwealth cannot explain John O'Keefe's injuries. They can't explain his head wound. How did he get the head wound if he landed on snow-covered grass and dirt? And by the way, before Mr. Lally gets up and says it, because I know he's going to, there is zero evidence before you, zero, that cold grass and dirt turns into ice or turns into concrete. Zero. They can't explain the injury above his right eye, that laceration. They can't explain his nose. They haven't even tried to. They can't explain the injury to his tongue, the laceration on his tongue. They cannot explain the injuries to his back, to the back of his hands, the bruises, and certainly they cannot explain the injuries to his right arm. But maybe most importantly, they cannot and haven't even tried to explain the lack of injuries on John's body from the neck down. Nothing. He was pristine. Not a bump, not a bruise, not a fracture, not a broken bone. Nothing to suggest that he was hit by a 7,000-pound SUV going 25 miles per hour.
It is reasonable to doubt that. We don't have to prove he wasn't hit by a car. We just have to prove that it's reasonable to doubt that he was. You're not an unreasonable person if you think that a man with no bruising anywhere on his body was not hit by a car. Okay. You are not unreasonable to believe that. Go ahead.
And what of that right arm? According to the Commonwealth's best and brightest, Trooper Paul, John absorbed the entirety of the collision, the whole collision, with that 3.5-ton SUV entirely with his right arm, launching him some 30 feet. But amazingly, the arm suffered no break, no fracture, and didn't even get a bruise. So how are those injuries properly explained? The evidence is simple. John got into an altercation. He was punched. He tried to defend himself by putting his hands up. He may have even scratched his own nose by putting his hands in front of his face.
I don't like
to defend
this.
himself.
I don't like this.
His hands were bruised and covering up.
5 minutes, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Your Honor. As he continued, he got hit, punch went through, and he fell to the ground, fracturing his skull. At some point during that altercation, the dog got hold of him, and the dog was pulled away. Every single injury is answered. Every single injury is explained by that.
Again, I think it needs to be reiterated to the jury that we don't have to prove that that's what happened. It's just wild, by the way, that what Ronnie said about it. They didn't really fucking talk about any of this shit. They're just like, oh, that's a distraction. That's just a distraction, all that stuff. We don't have to think. We don't have to explain to you that this definitely happened. You just have to think that maybe it could have. I don't know. Yeah, like these injuries are consistent with being in a fight, but they're not consistent with being in an automobile collision. I don't know what happened inside that house. I'm not a detective. I wasn't there. But he came out looking like he was in a fight, and he went inside the house, period.
Ladies and gentlemen, given what we know about the facts and the physical evidence in this case, the actual truth in this case, how did this happen? How did we end up here? We ended up here because of relationships, insider trading, playing the who you know game, and building a tall blue wall, which takes decades and generations. But the real question is it going to continue? With this festering malignancy that allows a lead detective and his supervisor to gloat and sneer while looking over naked pictures or looking for naked pictures of the woman that they've targeted, will that continue? And the answer should be, not if you have anything to say about it. Michael Proctor is the lead investigator in this case, and much as the Commonwealth might try, they cannot distance themselves from the stench of him on this case and this investigation. Those secret group chats illustrate the quality and character of his investigation. Remind yourself how an, quote, unbiased and an objective investigator, someone who's supposed to be looking for facts. Ask yourself, how did he approach his job late at night, sitting there in his office, deviously looking for naked pictures of Karen Reed and talking about her like she's a piece of meat, talking about her bodily functions, her medical conditions, calling her vile names. I don't even have it in me to repeat what he said about her. He reduced her to an object, and he went further by insulting her. He went further than insulting her, and he dehumanized her. And when he was done betraying that very humanity, he wished for her to commit suicide. That, ladies and gentlemen, is how you frame someone. That's how you dehumanize someone.
And again, reiterate. Is it reasonable to believe that a person with such poor ethics and such immorality in his soul, is it reasonable in such close associations with the people who would otherwise be considered suspects? Is it reasonable to believe that it is possible for somebody as low caliber as Michael Proctor to participate in a cover-up? Because if you believe that it's possible, then you must acquit Karen Reed. You don't have to you don't have to be 100% sure of it. You just have to think that it's possible, and that is reasonable doubt. Boom.
Someone so viciously that you can just pin it on the girl and cover for the homeowner because he's a Boston cop. That's how you rip a person's life apart and sleep like a baby while doing it. And then further that by saying, I hope she kills herself. Ladies and gentlemen, I just began the discussion this afternoon or this morning with a quote about the truth, and I did that because that's what this case is about. Top to bottom, tip to tail, it's about the truth, about hiding it or concealing it, but exposing the truth. The truth is immutable. It's not a feeling, it's not a whim. It's unflinching, it's unchanging, and it's everlasting. That's why the law is steady. That's why it's not captive to the whims of people drunk with power who think they're above the law, who think they're above.
And this is the, again, I loved it. I was all for this speech. This is the Remember the Titans part of it. And it's like, it's awesome. I fucking love this shit. This shit gets me hard. I love it. 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 I love Alan Jackson. I love this whole speech. This is the kind of speech that you give when you're like, fuck it. Time to win the fucking Super Bowl. You know, we won this shit. We're going to go out in fucking style, right? That's this kind of speech, right? You guys are about to do something amazing. You guys have a chance here to be part of something special, but you have to vote to acquit to do her of that. No, it's really not that big a deal. It's actually kind of the only thing you can do is acquit her. You're actually not doing anything special by acquitting Karen Reed. You're not. It's just fucking, you're doing the only thing that any reasonable person could do, and that is not putting her in jail for the rest of her life because they haven't proven their case. I wish it was something special, but it's just not. It's really not. Okay. Period.
Scrutiny. That's why you stand as the guardian of justice and the protector of justice. The law demands the very integrity that Trooper Proctor and his investigation lacks, and it requires that you cannot convict Karen Read unless the Commonwealth has met its incredibly high burden to prove every element beyond a reasonable doubt and to a moral certainty. And a moral certainty is defined as the highest degree of certainty possible in matters related to human affairs. It's the highest degree possible in your life. That's the level of certainty. And I'll leave you with this. You have the most powerful tool known to American jurisprudence because you have your vote. No one can take that away from you, not me, not the Commonwealth, not the court. You may not have asked to be here, but each of you have given something very special of yourselves. You've agreed to do that, which is the highest calling a citizen can answer in any way. You've agreed to give your community your best. And my question to you is, what will you do with this moment? Ignore the lies and the manipulations, the misogyny, the bias, the lack of evidence. Could you ever do that? Would you ever do that? Or will you stay with your verdict? I see the truth, and I will not ever look the other way. When you stare the truth down, you'll see that the Commonwealth has not proven its case beyond a reasonable doubt and to a moral certainty, not even close. Ladies and gentlemen, Karen Read is innocent. Do justice and find her not guilty. Thank you.
Chills is all I can get from that speech. It's so good. It's so good. But in essence, I don't believe that everything could be fine tuned. You could take a lot of the substance that he brought in there and just reasonable doubt. This is reasonable doubt. That's reasonable doubt. And that's what I would do. And that's what I think Alan Jackson's a very smart person. And I think that's what he will do in the second trial. He's going to learn from the mistakes. He's going to learn from everything. The Ronnie interview can only help us. It cannot help Hank Brennan. There's no information that we learned from the Ronnie interview that Hank Brennan can then use to turn around and have Karen Read convicted. Nothing valuable came out of that for them. Only valuable things came out of that from us. I tell my son this all the time, right? It's like, and he doesn't like it when I'm trying to teach him to play basketball. Okay. And because I love basketball, I love the game. And, I'm trying to teach him how to dribble. I'm his coach too. I'm the coach of the team. And, he dribbles and he's doing this thing or he dribbles with his palm, like the ball hits the palm. And I'm like, no, son, the ball is supposed to come up and take up your whole hand. And then you push it off your fingers. That way your fingers are directing the direction of the ball. You hit it down like this. You're not going to do that. And he gets mad because he knows everything. Oh, what? You're telling me I don't know how to do it, Dad. You're telling me I don't know how to do it. No, you're just not perfect, son. You're learning. Everybody makes mistakes, but I would not be helping you out if I was to focus on the things that you're doing well. Like you're rebounding well. I taught you how to box out. You're doing that well, right? So you got that. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, this is great. And I'm not going to talk about the things that you do well because you're already doing those things well. You don't need to get better at those things. You need to get better at dribbling. Okay. Because ask Jaylen Brown, how many, he's not a good dribbler and he's in the NBA. Okay. You need to get better at dribbling. So that's why I'm focusing on the things that you're not doing well, because if you can get better at the things that you're not doing well, whatever. Like my mom, I used to play the piano, right? And I took 7 years of piano, believe it or not. We came from a very artsy family. And I used to play my songs or whatever, and I'd have my whole sheet music out and I'd be playing it, whatever. And then I'd fuck up at one part. And then it would drive my mom crazy because I would go back to the beginning of the song and start again. And she would say, no, just start at this part on this measure, because that's where you made the mistake. I don't need to hear you play the part you got right a million times again. You got to focus on the part that you got wrong. And that's a valuable use of your time. So that's all that, like you focus, like it's not a criticism of Alan Jack. Well, it is, I guess, but it's a way to get better. It comes from a place of love. And it comes from and what I love is justice. And what I would love is for Karen Read to be acquitted and for the real killers of John O'Keefe to stand justice, to stand, and be arrested. But that can't happen if Karen Read's convicted. It can't happen. So we need, you might not like it, whatever. Some people might say that, oh, you're being critical of him. You're talking shit about Alan Jackson. How dare you, whatever. But it's even Alan Jackson respects me. And I know Alan Jackson, listens to these shows, and I'm sure he's fucking smart, dude. That dude is the smartest dude I've ever spoken to in my life. He follows up on everything, and he will follow. Like, he is very cognizant of this, and he trust me. Alan gets it. Alan gets it. He knows that he needs to deliver an acquittal for Karen Read, and he will do whatever it takes to do that. And he will. And I have faith in him, okay, that this trial is going to be way better for Karen Read than the first one. All right. Let me read some turtle chats here, shall we? Because I'm sure we got some here. It's been a long show. Holy shit. For an impromptu. Okay. All right. All right. Retired prison captain sends $10 and goes, I respect your take on the closing. Agreed. However, the biggest hurdle is finding 12 people who don't wear hockey helmets and lick the windows on the bus on the way to court during trial. I honestly think they would be better than the eggheads that we got. So there's that. Thank you. Derek sends $5 and goes, I missed the juror last night. We'll go back and watch. But did anyone ask what the jury thought about Ryan Nagel mentioning the feds? Did they even catch it? When I initially interviewed him, he said that he didn't pick up on that. He might have said something different last night. I'd have to go back and listen to what he said last night, but I definitely know that when I first interviewed him, I asked him that specific question and he did not remember it. I don't remember if he was consistent with that statement last night. I have to go back and listen to it. Okay. Okay. Next up. Mackenzie sends $10, goes, I think we can glean from your interview is that the defense overestimated the intelligence of the jurors. So did I. It's a shame. Thank you for all you do. We all did. So, I mean, go back and read my tweets. I was sure that they were going to acquit. Sure of it. So I said last night, I think he said he did catch that, but that might be one of those like situations where because I asked him last time about that, now he remembers it. I don't know. But there's that. Okay. Next up. Lynn sends $50. Thank you, Lynn. And says, Doctor, is it possible for the Reeds to change seating arrangements with the O'Keefes? In my opinion, the jury seeing the facial reactions from the O'Keefes leaves an impression that's harmful to Karen. That's such a good point. That's a really good point. It is a huge advantage for the Commonwealth to have the O'Keefe family staring at the jury, dude. It's like, that is such a good point. And again, it wouldn't be that way if they were in the regular courtroom. Tom sends $5 and goes, Tom DeRosia, CPU Tom CPU sends $5 and goes, please, you're above the mainstream media, dude. From day one, you've provided the truth with receipts. This is a huge story with the juror and every quote unquote reporter failed to do their job. You did and have done your job from day one. Take this victory lap. You earned it. Oh, I'm gonna, Tom. And I appreciate the compliment, sir. So thank you very much. There will be many victory laps in my future. Let me tell you. Hetty's washing machine sends $5, goes, mark my words. Brian Albert's downfall will come the old fashioned way. RICO or tax evasion. Modern day mobsters don't live in the city anymore. They phone that shit in from the suburbs. Okay. Thank you. Courtney sends $10, goes, I read this on the justice page. It really feels like someone was pushing the defense's distractions thing to someone on the jury who then was pushing it to the others. Like, watch the defense. Anything they say is just a distraction. It just seems so odd that they were thinking that. Yeah. And they just dismissed it. It was odd, but again, I have no evidence that anyone on the jury was compromised at all. So I'm not going to go there, but maybe. All right. Retired prison captain sends $10 and goes, scariest 3 words in the dictionary. Trial by jury. The fact that 12 adults are deciding your fate and don't know about split verdicts. What the actual fuck? Yeah, it is scary. Courtney sends $10 and goes, they need some right-wing conservative folks. Those are the kind of people that believe Trump was wrongfully charged. The kind of people who believe Daniel Penny was wrongfully charged, who inherently don't trust their government because they've seen truth and corruption every day in the mainstream media. It's a good point. They've experienced real life, not upper class privilege. People of this nature, people like turtle riders, rational, wise, but not necessarily overly educated. A lot of overly educated people have a lot less common sense and humility. I mean, that's a good point. A lot of these towns, these Norfolk County towns, are wealthy, liberal towns. Wellesley, Westwood, Needham, Brookline. There's a lot of them, right? And that's a good point. I do think that like blue collar, working class people with Trump signs in their yard are more likely to believe that the government, the liberal government, is capable, which again, you don't want to go there though, because then you run the risk of offending liberals on the jury. But you want to make them believe, no, Newton is Middlesex County, but you want to make them believe Cohasset is also in North. The odds of somebody from Cohasset ending up on the jury are slim because it's one of the smallest towns in Norfolk County. But, you know, most of the people on the jury, the biggest municipalities in Norfolk County, and thus statistically more likely where jurors are going to come from, are Quincy, Weymouth, Brookline, Norwood, what else? Walpole, go up and down the line. Where's the other big towns? Braintree. You're more definitely likely to get someone from Braintree on that jury. There will be some from Canton, Stoughton, but you know, the odds of the small little, just statistically, I mean, if you do it, there's probably like on that jury, there's probably 3 or 4 people from Quincy on that jury. And I think that's, or maybe not, maybe there wasn't. That seemed like a Needham jury, that people that were on there, you know, like the foreman, he's from Westwood, I believe, or one of those towns. Like a lot of these people are from uppity towns, you know, but I do think that's a good point I hadn't thought of, Courtney. So thank you very much. Oh, and Randolph, of course. Yeah, Randolph. Although I didn't think there's a lot of Randolph people on that jury. Just saying. Okay. Next one. Talon sends $10, goes, would there be any reason for Bev to deny 𝗏𝗏 joining the team? No, there would not be any, except they might try to invent something, and you can bet my name will be brought up. So I will probably be the biggest obstacle because he represents me. So we'll see if Hank makes that. Hank has no interest in justice, and he knows that 𝗏𝗏 is good. He does not want 𝗏𝗏 on that team, period. Next, Paula sends $10 and says, Dr. Turtleboy, I think we can say we knew you win. Fantastic job on the interview of the year. I have similar intestinal issues as Karen Reed. TMI, I know that there's no way I believe she drank 9 drinks. The way she's picking up could have been for someone else. Right. Exactly. Carmen sends $25, goes, thank you for having Ronnie on. Good to know that common sense isn't that common in Canton. Absolutely. Molly sends $25 and says, in the words of Jay-Z, I ain't past the bar, but I know a little bit. That's great. That's a good line. I ain't past the bar, but I know a little bit. I have a degree in criminal justice from Wennick, right near UMass in Springfield. And I'm telling you that if they could grab a professor from there or Northeastern who teaches criminal procedure, where the defense could ask them questions so the jury knows what real crime scene preservation is, it would make a huge difference. That's a great point. All my CJ professors were lawyers or staties or both, having one of those folks. Yeah, that's a great point. They need more witnesses, man. You got to get creative. Something like that would be a great witness, and it wouldn't cost much. You wouldn't have to fly someone like that in. You just send them a subpoena. I think it might be free. They have to show up. If you send them a subpoena, you're a witness. That's a great point, man. It's a great point. Get them on there. Dr. Marvos sends $10 and goes, with mega team of Jackson, Unetti, 𝗃𝗍cie, 𝗏𝗏, Little, and Hank, and his silent toady Lally, is there danger that the Commonwealth looks like the underdog to the jury? I think that's how they appeared the first time around. And I certainly think that Lally came across as a lovable loser, but that's why I think the addition of Spanky will backfire on them. because he doesn't have that same aura. He doesn't have like the lovable government cheese eating sandwich guy with the hair gel thing that 𝗬𝗟𝗓 had, where people felt bad for him. Hank they're going to expect more from Hank, and he's not going to bring them anything more than 𝗬𝗟𝗓 brought them. So thank you. Christy sends $10, goes, I know Proctor is a corrupt pig, but is it possible someone else planted the taillight like Kevin Albert or Brian Higgins? They had access. Of course it is. Of course it is, Christy. Of course it is. 100%. So thank you. Nicole sends $5, goes, I think it'll be important for the defense to reiterate the largest piece of taillight was found was 3 weeks later, and it was the size of a dinner plate. How could that be? Exactly. I said that earlier. Thank you. Rosaline sends $10 and goes, Dr. Turtleboy, thank you for all you do. Great job with the juror interview. Forget the fact that the feds hired 𝗃𝗏. Pretend KR hired him. If 𝗃𝗏, the most expert, can be dismissed as a distraction solely because they were called by the defense, then no expert that Karen Reed brings will be credible per this jury. It's a great point. Who told this jury that the defense will distract you? It's a good point. Yeah, I mean, if every defense witness is a distraction, then it's like, then why even bother? Like, oh, what these jurors did was criminal, man. Criminal. And they should be called out for it. They should be called out for it as fucking idiots. Christy sends $10 goes, Karen Reed needs people of color on the jury. I've been on a jury, and black people have serious reservations on convicting even when the investigation is flawless because they know what it's like to be falsely accused. Now, I don't like generalizing as a general rule of thumb because not all black people feel that way. But statistically, I like statistics, and you are more likely to feel that way if you were to pick 100 black people out of a hat and just say, well, how many of you guys don't trust the government? It's going to be higher than 100 white people, period. Just is. Alex sends $10. It goes, it's too bad you were never able to take Clay to see the decorated dudes at D&E Pizza. Well, I would never take. He would get kicked out. Chris, you read my motion to dismiss. Chris Albert kicks people out who want to give him money, and then he claims about economic harm. So thank you. Danielle sends $50, goes, hey, Aidan, great show last night. Another win for Turtle Boy, 3 hours with the juror live. Very cool. I'm not going to lie, though. Hearing what went behind the scenes was frustrating at times. Tell Karen to get an auto body shop owner's damage appraisers on the next jury. Fuck the medical people. Thank you very much, Danielle. And I appreciate the compliment. And I agree. Huge win for Turtle Boy. Rose sends $10, goes, did anyone ask the jury about Jen McCabe's 226 Google search? Did anyone ask the juror about Jen McCabe's 226 Google search? Rose, I really hope you're kidding, because if you're not, my fucking head is going to explode from that question. So thank you for the turtle chat. Thank you. And if that's a good joke, that's a joke. Good joke. Thank you. Gina sends $10, goes, I don't get how she's not guilty on leaving the scene of an accident, but guilty on manslaughter, which is an accident. Bingo. I don't get that one either. Leaving the scene of I don't get that one. How is that acquitted? But that's what makes me think it was just a compromise. Like, bro, we got to do something. These guys are fucking idiots. Fucking 5 days. What did they talk about for 5 days? I don't get it. I still don't get it. Christy sends $10. Oh, no, I already read that one. Okay, let me see if we got any cash apps here. Last call if you want your donos read. We got Liznay sends $5 and goes, for Kerry, if John was a true friend, then come forth. Okay, thank you. We got here Lisa sends $15 and goes, you are the best. Thank you for all you do. Oh, you're too kind, Lisa. Thank you very much. Next up, Tracy sends $5 and goes, Ronnie said juror intimidation with Brian Albert and Colin Albert. Yes, he did. And now that's another thing. Colin Albert's name was never mentioned in the closing arguments, which the McAlberts love to bring up. So just to shut them up, I would bring up with them and say, and because that's a fair point. They did bring up they talked about Colin Albert a lot and didn't even mention him in the closing. I would say that we don't know. We know that Colin Albert was there. We know that they intended to hide him there. And we know that Colin Albert has a proclivity for violence. We don't know that Colin Albert for sure was involved in murdering John O'Keefe, but it's possible that he could be. And we can't rule him out because he was never questioned by the police. The same police who have known Colin since the day he was born. The same police whose mother offered the police a bribe the day that Karen Read was arrested. We talked about Colin Albert a lot. We can't prove Colin Albert killed John O'Keefe. But we know that Karen Read didn't do it, and we know that he's dead. And we know that Colin Albert has a proclivity for violence. So it's possible that he did. Period. Done. Next. Tracy sends $5 and goes, only tear shed was about Turtle Boy, not from John O'Keefe's friends. Oh, I see what you're saying. Like that McAlberts cried about. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. And I think that's it. Okay. Let me just refresh the turtle chat so I don't miss anyone. Okay. Yeah. What a long 3.5 hour impromptu. Didn't expect this to take that long. But anyway, guys, I am going to get going. Another big day, Tuesday. Karen Read has a big day in court on Tuesday, and it's at 11. So I will be there, and I look forward to seeing some of you fine people there, hopefully. And we will be showing our support for Karen Read and John O'Keefe outside the courthouse. And they probably won't show up because they never do, because they don't give a shit about them. Only we do. So, all right, guys, I love you guys. Keep up the great work. Brush your teeth and get a good night's sleep. Peace, 𝗃𝗍𝗏𝗃𝗍.